The clash took place in an open area. The bridge was destroyed and the way to the base of one of the opposing sides was cut off. Everyone held their breath when they saw the hero Altine. His longtime acquaintance couldn't have him walking around anywhere and destroying everything in his path. He was glad to meet Elria. The girl had known before that he would be here. She had some marvelous magic in store for today. Rain was eager to see her. He hoped after hundreds of equal battles, they could finally find out who was stronger. Elria reminded him each time what their battle would be. Today was the 629th. No matter how hard he tried, he kept forgetting it. But Rain knew that on the battlefield he would never show his pity to anyone. After all, as long as he was called a hero, he had no right to retreat. At the same time, Elria was a sage and could not afford to lose to him. In the Altine Empire, which had great military power, there lived a man who was called a hero. For the rest of his life, he participated in numerous battles without ever losing or kneeling. In Vegalta, a country at war against the Altine Empire, there lived a girl who was called a sage. Using the principles of magic, she improved her country's standing in the war and increased its power by spreading various magical techniques. The two constantly met on the battlefield. They never slept, never rested, as if they were forever enjoying battles. The only one against whom the hero, Rain Frieden, could go all out was Elria Caldwin, the sage. However, this relationship could not last forever. Eventually, they would still come to a point where one of them would prove to be stronger. The aged Rain received news of the sage's death. Wyatt, who reported it, said that it was confirmed information because it was a message sent from a spy who had infiltrated Vegalta. Rain slumped down in his chair with force. All the time, he had thought that he was destined to die first. According to Lyeth, upon hearing the news of her death, a royal decree was sent to His Excellency Frieden from the country. Rain hoped, in the event of the sage's death, they wouldn't consider him a useless old man. The subordinate recounted the contents of the royal decree. Now that the sage was dead, he was to take advantage of the chaos in the enemy country and lead his army to invade the neighboring country, Vegalta, and put an end to years of war. Rain furiously cursed the top Altine. Wyatt saw this as the best opportunity for them. However, everyone who had ever been present on the battlefield knew that both of them did not want their lives to be wasted under the onslaught of their forces. His Excellency engaged in a one-on-one battle with the sage. That was why Wyatt was so upset. They could not use the death of the great sage for a war that in addition desired peace with His Excellency. Instead, they had to mourn her death. Now he said some pleasant things to Rain. He had to assure himself that he would convey these words to her. Dropping his armor, the old man said he was just going for a walk. He didn't need to pack like he was going to war to meet a friend. The border between Altine and Vegalta. The knights on post at the fortress discerned in the daredevil a great hero from the Altine Empire. The Rhine was coming through. The towering wall was no obstacle to him. The guards were stunned by the unyielding determination of their foe. The mages entered the fray. Pointing her staff at the hero, the mage girl shot straight at his back. She was extremely displeased with his invasion of their country. Rain recognized the little Tiana, believing she was claiming the place of her dead teacher. The girl demanded that he give her an answer. Despite much resistance, the mighty warrior stood his ground. He was seriously wounded, but not a single feature on his face wavered. Rain had come to say goodbye to the sage. That was his only purpose here. Vegalta, the royal capital. The hero stepped forward without stopping, leaving a trail of destruction and chaos behind him. He did not have much time left. It was unclear to the guards present what purpose he had come to their great sage. Rain ensured that they did not stand in his way, for all he wanted to do before he died was talk to her. Finally, his eyes stopped on her. Time seemed to stand still, and she appeared before him still as tender as in his most vivid memories. Rain could hardly believe she was dead. He recognized the strength of the boys she had raised, but they were still no match for her. It was hard for him to give in to them lest he accidentally kill someone. Elria was something unimaginable. Even now, most people remembered her with respect, and yet they still hadn't decided who was stronger. But he was happy to fight someone like her for over 50 years. He had no doubts about the fact that if they were in another world, they would definitely be friends. The image of that cheerful Elria, who had lit up his life like a ray of sunshine. Unable to bear the severe wounds, he died with these thoughts. Rain slowly opened his eyes and saw a beautiful woman. She took him in her arms with tenderness and care and called his name in a ringing voice. Rain realized that he had died. A moment ago, he was still an old man, but now a woman he didn't know stood before him. It was obvious from her demeanor that she was his mother. Rain screamed, gripped by panic, not realizing what was happening to him or where he was. 18 years passed. Rain went with his crew to cut down trees. He had great confidence in the local men, who assigned him difficult tasks and knew he could handle anything. The boy was really skillful and strong. There was confidence and inner strength in his movements. They thanked fate that they had Rain. The guy didn't even know how to use magic, which was more surprising. Suddenly, a squirrel peeked out from the hollow of a felled tree, which was instantly noticed. It was an incredible discovery, for it belonged to a new species. They should have hastened to report it to the newspaper. Rain was sure that he would spend all his days in this life like this. A girl who had caught a glimpse of Rain on one of the newspaper pages finally found him. The boy's mom was in a hurry to tell him the big news. Rain didn't remember doing anything special. This was the first time he had heard of an aristocrat from the royal capital coming to look for him this morning. They had told him to go to the village head's house. The boy didn't think he could have had anything to do with it. She thought it was a mistake too, but that aristocrat called him by name. Rain was too calm even though his mom was so excited. There couldn't have been anything that surprised him more than waking up and finding out that 1,000 years had passed. His old homeland, the Empire of Altine, had long ago been destroyed and absorbed into the neighboring country of Vegalta, which had now become known as the magical kingdom of Vegalta, and magic had become something available to absolutely everyone. So there was little to surprise him, especially considering his past life. His mental age was close to 90. He decided to immediately go to the head of the village. Rain also treated his mother's concern with indifference. First, he was going to disprove that he had somehow messed up. Intrigue had settled among the residents. Rumors had already spread throughout the village. Everyone gathered around the magical carriage that appeared to belong to a high nobleman. The village head rushed towards Rain. The man was gripped by panic and couldn't imagine what this guy could have done. This was not just any aristocrat, but a distant descendant of the royal family of the well-known magical kingdom of Vegalt. Rain as well as the head had no idea why such a person would suddenly need him. They only told the head that he would understand everything when they met. In any case, the man could not abandon any of the people of his village. The boy finally went inside. Waiting for him was a girl with an appearance that seemed surprisingly familiar. Rain suddenly realized that he was facing a very important person. He felt the need to show respect and addressed her formally. However, she didn't seem to understand why he was speaking to her like that. The boy tried to watch his tone as he spoke to a member of the noble house of Caldwin. The girl was concerned that he didn't remember anything. He assumed they had met earlier and she was looking for a guy who was a hero. A spark lit up in her eyes. But the Rain she knew didn't talk like that. As it seemed to him, they were going in circles now. That's when the girl remembered that the guy sounded exactly like him. Rain replied that he was the one she was talking about. Like the hero of Altine, he changed his tone depending on the situation and who he was talking to. The girl was finally convinced that the one she was looking for was standing in front of her. It didn't cost him any effort to guess that she was the Elria he knew. The girl introduced herself as Elria Caldwin, originally from Vegalta, and she was about 200 years old. She liked to read books and drink warm tea with milk. She also often fell asleep in the sun when she was tired. To recognize her, Rain had nothing but her name and place of birth. They only saw each other on the battlefield. To find out, she suggested they just fight each other. The guy noticed that there was no place here where she could use her magic. Elria was confident that she would recognize him if he could dispel her magic in 10 seconds. Rain led her to a good place to discreetly release some magic. He worked here. She was curious as to how he survived. Rain plowed fields, chopped trees, and hauled freight, all because he couldn't use magic. But apparently he was just as strong as he had been in his previous life, so she might not be deterred. Elria unleashed a powerful attack on him. Rain easily repelled it, showing his unbreakable strength and unwavering confidence. Elria knew the exact number of their battles, which totaled 63-29. As always, she was the only one counting. Her heart fluttered with joy when she learned that he was Rain. The boy never thought he could see her like this again. She'd been reborn, so she thought he might have been here too, without any proof. He wondered how she had found him. Elria saw a squirrel in the newspaper and recognized him from the picture in the article. She checked even the village newspapers, confident in her intuition. Rain wondered about the rebirth she spoke of. According to the girl, it was the transfer of all memories and abilities from the old life to the new. To be precise, it was called the magic of reincarnation. But it wasn't Elria who used this magic. Reincarnation magic is the name she gave it on a provisional basis. It existed in theory, but the girl didn't know how it worked. Rain believed Elria knew what would happen if someone used reincarnation magic, but not the process or method of using it. Come to think of it, even the sage who created the magic didn't know how to use it. There were things that even she, the sage, didn't understand. But if it was true reincarnation magic, Elria would look exactly the same as she did in her past life. But her appearance was slightly different. It wasn't so noticeable right away. Pulling back a strand of hair, the girl revealed her human ears. It happened that she had been reborn as a human instead of an elf. That was why she and Rain now had the same ears. Regarding the fact that Rain couldn't use magic, Elria inquired about his results of the magic test that was taken as a child. As soon as Rain touched the test device, it broke, causing him to be told off and called ignorant. It was a better option for him to live his life in this village than to bring trouble to everyone with his magic. Magical creatures were still everywhere, but the world was much calmer now than in his previous life. Elria reminded him that he was a hero. Also, Rain was as strong as she was. The boy credited that to the past. After gathering her courage, the girl dared to tell him something important. She asked him to take her as his wife with firm confidence and without a shadow of doubt. Elria decided that he would now be her fiancé. He asked her not to speak of it as something predetermined. She reasoned that if you belonged to the Caldwin family, related to the royal family, then regardless of your level of magic, you could pass the entrance exam to the Magic Academy. Rain will be able to show his capabilities and become a magician. She thought it was a perfect plan, which, however, seemed like a deception to him. But Elria was firmly convinced otherwise, because Rain was strong enough to fight her for more than 50 years. In addition, he was called a hero by everyone, and now no one would recognize him simply because he couldn't use magic. She was not happy with that. Her suggestion still gave him doubts. Elria had offered to see who was stronger. He thought that wasn't fair. The girl was sure that Rain felt the same way. There were times when they were called the sage and the hero, and losing to one of them could lead to the downfall of their countries. That's why, despite their fair fights, they tried not to take each other seriously. But if only their wishes were taken into account, Rain decided that he would not run away or hide. He would always accept her challenge. Rain informed the village chief of his decision to go to the capital with Lady Caldwin. Elria still couldn't believe that she had taken that step. The villagers greeted the news with excitement and joy. The girl seemed to burn with shame and hid behind his back, trying not to attract attention. Rain noticed that if the villagers stood so close, they wouldn't be able to get into the magic carriage. The village headman hurriedly dispersed the crowd. Taking Elria by the hand, Rain led her to the carriage. Once inside, the boy still couldn't get rid of the thought that everything was happening too fast. The girl, full of embarrassment, could not utter a word. Rain turned to her, staring at her point blank. Her behavior was understandable, for even before reincarnation, she was shy of strangers. He asked if she had any guesses as to why he couldn't use magic. Elria assumed it was because of his magical abilities. First of all, the magic device functioned as a conduit for a person's magical energy. Ordinary magic is similar to water. Then the magical device is a water channel. Its magic was more like stone, which was why it didn't flow, and if you tried to channel it through the water channel, it would simply break. The memories of the broken exam device popped up in his mind. She didn't know why he had such magic, but if he was going to use it, he would need to make him a device that suited his particular style. As for time, although she was the one who developed the theory of magic, it took her 100 years. She had just solved the riddle that he had been searching for the answer to for 18 years. It was clear to the girl that he wanted to use magic. Rain wanted to know what it was like to use magic. Elria was certain that even with magic she could not be defeated. She thanked him for agreeing to marry her. Rain felt that he was the one who should have expressed his gratitude to her. He made no secret of his surprise when she proposed to him so unexpectedly. She claimed that it was the only way to fight again. Rain didn't bother to cross her, since it was the only way for a commoner like him to become a skilled mage. Be that as it may, it should have made solving the problem easier. They both reincarnated after 1,000 years, which was not a coincidence. Someone had something to do with it. It was necessary to find him and find out what purpose he had. Even if it was a coincidence, they had nothing to lose. The fact that he was a commoner would make it difficult to find the answer, so they would have to ask her. Rain noticed that her family was related to the royal dynasty. It turned out that the king's daughter Tiana had taken their surname. The boy remembered Tiana, the same one who had once blocked his path to say goodbye to Elria. Now the Caldwin family had inherited the sage's name. Rain could not believe that fate had brought him together with a girl from such a noble family. He hoped it wouldn't be a problem for her. Elria confidently stated that if she cared that they had been sworn enemies in a past life, she would never have proposed marriage to him. Rain also trusted her for that reason. They exchanged warm words of thanks, recognizing the power of mutual trust. Rain shocked her by confessing that he had never been engaged to anyone in his past life. He thought this was unsurprising, since all he did was fight and risk himself all the time, so he was always rejected. He wondered if they still remembered him in this life. Elria exploded with emotion upon hearing his words. Stories about him were indeed still going around among the people. But the thing was, over 1,000 years, the stories about him had become very dramatized, which intrigued him. Guy assumed the point was that he was from an enemy nation, but he turned out to be wrong. Elria was hesitant to tell him the whole truth. The conversation had to be stopped when they arrived at the place. Rain froze, stunned by the sight of her house. He had expected anything but this. The father rushed toward his daughter with a storm of emotion. Gallion Caldwin was certain that she had something else to say to him. He had heard she was off on another excursion. Elria calmly confirmed it. He was genuinely pleased that his daughter trusted him enough to be frank. She was sure she had left a note and also warned the people in the mansion. Her father assured her that since she took care of it, they were not worried. Elria solemnly announced that she had brought her fiancé. Gallion sharply rebuffed her, but the girl had already brought him. She introduced Rain. The girl's father ordered the lad to leave, but Rain, with determination in his eyes, did not move. Then the man welcomed him to his mansion. Gallion made no secret of the fact that he would never have allowed his daughter to marry a man without pedigree, but since he was not the head of the house, he could not make decisions concerning the house of Caldwin. A woman came to the commotion, demanding an explanation. Gallion replied with a triumphant smile that Elria had brought her fiancé. She asked him to stand aside, noting that he was too noisy. It was Elria's mother, Alicia Caldwin, who was the head of the family. Rain, showing respect, apologized for the late introduction and gave her name. She had never heard of his family name. The boy explained that he came from a mountain village in the Arlite region, from a family of commoners. That's why the head of House Caldwin had never heard of him. Alicia noted that for a commoner from the countryside, he held himself well. As a man who came to greet her, he tried to exercise at least that much politeness. It seemed to Alicia that he was more judicious than her daughter. She had just insulted her, feeling embarrassed about it. The woman was very concerned about her daughter's future. Elria informed her that she had finally found Rain. The head of the family asked him to raise his head and relax. It would be a shame for their family to turn their backs on someone who had honored the Caldwins. The first thing they were going to do was to welcome him as their guest. The girl's mother decided to speak to him personally. She felt that the two of them were not suited for such a conversation, and that things would go more smoothly if they talked things over with each other. She just wanted to understand what was going on and how things came to be. Rain didn't think that botched excuses would work on her. He told her the real reason they had decided to get engaged. It was so that he could enjoy the name and status of the Caldwin family. Alicia guessed that it was Elria's idea. He didn't mind if she decided to clarify it with her, but the woman didn't need confirmation because he was Rain. When Elria was just a toddler, out of the blue, she told her that she wanted to find a man named Rain Frieden. But when Alicia asked her why, she just shook her head and didn't say anything, just said that she was sure he was here. So the woman just assumed it was childish babble and didn't take it seriously. To put it bluntly, this child was strange from birth. She had a talent for magic. She had never cried even when she was a baby, and she was even frightened of her own mother. This made the boy think. 1,000 years after her past life, she wakes up in a world where she knows no one. And even in such a situation, she kept looking for him without any clues. If he is the same Rain, Alicia agreed to approve their engagement. Rain was taken aback by her willingness to completely leave her house for a guy with no pedigree based on Elria's words alone. She supposed it was only natural for her, as a parent, to honor her precious daughter's wish. Alicia asked about him. The boy told her that Alicia was his only equal, and they had been apart for a long time. But like Elria, who kept looking for him, he never forgot about her either. He wondered what she would think of this serene world if she saw him. He longed for her to live in this world too, and he wanted to be with her. The head of the household would have given him a passing grade on the proposal. Everyone can talk the talk, but only actions and results matter. The condition for accepting the engagement was that he must obtain the rank of mage with Elria at the same magical academy, and he must prove himself while at the academy. She suggested that he just use his power. Alicia had high hopes for him since even Elria approved of him. She called out to Gallion, who instantly appeared in the doorway like a shadow attracted by her call. She suggested that he check to see if the lad was good and resolute, and if he was worthy of admission to the magical academy. Rain decided that then he would just dodge all of his attacks and strike out on his own. The guy asked not to complain if he accidentally destroyed the whole building. Rain was brought to a special magical training room run by the country. Even those who weren't mages could participate in magical battles. Elria was also training here. Alicia left the men and went to her daughter. Gallion was burning with impatience, anticipating their fight. Rain asked if he minded that they use the same victory conditions as agreed. Of course, he agreed without hesitation. Rain would win if, starting now, he could dodge all of his attacks for an hour. but it would probably be difficult for the guy to hit him. Gallian was the son-in-law of the Caldwin family, so he had to be one of the best modern mages. If Rain could strike him, he would let him call him daddy. It would be nicer for the guy to call him father-in-law. Gallian rushed into the attack with lightning speed, hoping to take his opponent by surprise. Rain dodged the blow and showed excellent reaction. The man offered to take the battle to the next level. Both possessed incredible power. Gallian's blows were so swift and powerful that dodging them seemed impossible. Rain figured that if Elria was training here, there must be a strong magic barrier somewhere. The man felt as if he was training with Elria, so he didn't find it necessary to hold back. In that case, Rain decided to make his move. Alicia entered the room where her daughter was sitting, immersed in her thoughts. She needed to talk to her. The girl was worried about Rain. Alicia informed her with a slight smile that Gallian was dealing with him right now. She asked if her daughter was sure that he was the same Rain she was talking about. There was not an ounce of doubt in the girl. The woman would never have thought that she would actually find him. Elria was also a little excited. But Rain really was here. It wasn't hard for the mother to notice that she really liked him. Elria was slowly losing confidence and confessing her feelings, which made her mother resent her. The girl explained that she had never experienced such feelings. Elria realized this when she found herself on the brink of death. She wanted to see Rain, his smile, and if she could see him again. She thought this time she could tell him she liked him. Alicia noticed that they both thought alike, looking at all things in the past tense. The girl certainly wasn't trying to hide something from her past life from her mother and others, but something was compelling her to keep it a secret. The woman decided to leave the question unanswered and asked if she had talked to him. Alicia hoped she told him everything, that she liked him and wanted to tie her life to him. But Elria didn't talk about it. The woman knew she was shy and clumsy with words, but she couldn't believe she hadn't even told him about it. Elria admitted that she had thought about it a lot, and the word engagement was the first thing that came to her mind. Remembering how he had firmly stated his desire to be with Elria, Alicia said that he was a pretty good young man for being able to say such a thing in such a situation. Her daughter was eager to find out what he had said, but she could not tell her. Alicia advised her daughter to make sure she confessed her feelings to him first, and then ask him. In that case, it would be interesting to acknowledge Rain and let Gallian train him. When asked by Elria what they were doing now, she replied that she had instructed Gallian to test his abilities to validate their engagement. The woman warned that if she wanted to ask her to be gentle with him, she wouldn't listen to her. But Elria was about to deliver something different. Rain couldn't use magic, but he was very strong, which meant Daddy was in danger. In the same second, a powerful impact shook the space. A massive figure collapsed through the ceiling and landed on the floor with a clatter. Rain's blow was a crushing whirlwind of force, sweeping away everything in its path. Rain called out to Elria from the street, asking if she had seen Gallian. The girl replied that he had just flown here. Rain froze, trying to understand how that was possible, since he was holding back as best he could. Elria couldn't imagine what he had done. The guy had been told not to hold back, so he pushed him lightly. In that case, Elria thought her father was fine. Unlike her mother, she took it calmly. Her mother had just found out how strong Rain was. The girl proudly said that the man she loves is the strongest. It had been a month since he had torn a wing of Caldwin Manor to pieces. He used the library looking for references to Altine or a hero, which did not turn up. This would have been obvious if it had been a village library. What was surprising was that even the prominent Caldwin family had no record of it. When Elria brought him the letter, Rain suddenly wondered if he had even passed on news of his and Elria's engagement to the village. The letter came from his mother, who could hardly believe the news of her son's betrothal to the daughter of the Caldwin family. She stated that she would remain silent to savor his father's reaction when he returned home. It became clear that she thought it was a joke. The village head asked Rihanna to bring back some souvenirs from the royal capital. The girl reasoned that he had already visited it. He figured it was definitely related to resentment over the destruction of an entire wing. Over the past month, Alicia had carefully taught him the good manners and etiquette of the Caldwin family. Then Elria suggested that they go shopping together. They had to buy things to wear for the academy exam. Rain agreed with her, because with that look, he wouldn't be able to match the image of Elria's fiancé. The girl was excited about the possibility of going out with him. Elria's mother was very happy for her daughter and hoped that their date would go wonderfully. Both dressed up, anticipating a wonderful evening. The girl was glowing with happiness. She guessed that he had borrowed things from her father. Rain doubted whether to ask him to do so after giving him so much trouble. Elria thought it was cool and unusual to see another side of Rain. But today she wanted to find something that would suit him even more. The boys went shopping and enjoyed sampling a variety of delicious foods. The cuisine at the Elria family's estate was delicious, but hundreds of years ago, something like this would have been unthinkable. The girl choked up as she said that they added some salt to the simply grilled meat and stale bread. Rain understood her completely. What pleased her most was being able to eat like this with him. He noticed the breadcrumbs on her face. This moment was incredibly touching. Elria was preparing for something more. Suddenly, her mother's admonition popped into her mind. The situation made the boy confused. The girl had a place she wanted to show him. They walked out to a place with a great view of the Vegalta Kingdom's magic academy where they would take their exams. In fact, Elria could have enrolled there as early as 12 years old, but she had postponed her enrollment because she was looking for him. He thanked her for her time. Also, the king asked her to delay so that he and the princess would not enroll at the same time. As a reward, she received sweets. It was strange for her to think that now Rain and her would study there together. Rain doubted that she would pass the exams successfully. Suddenly she asked if there was anyone he liked in his home village. With a smile on his face, he admitted that to him, who along with his past life had already passed his 90s. Everyone looked like children or grandchildren. In addition, he also thought about her all the time, just like she had been looking for him all this time. Touched by his words, Elria explained that she didn't just want to fight with him, but also wanted to spend time together like today. That's why she was glad that she and Rain were betrothed. So the girl asked him to take care of her from now on, and he asked her to take care of him in return. There were a lot of people gathered at the Vegal Royal Academy of Magic. Many of them had come here from other countries to take the most prestigious exam. All eyes were fixed on Miss Elria. The girl, feeling awkward, hid behind Rain's back. It was difficult for the guy to walk, as she continued to hold on to him from behind. She thought it would be easier for him if she climbed on his back. However, he thought it would make her embarrass her more. Mostly everyone looked at her because they thought she was cute. It was important for her to hear his opinion on the matter. Feeling that he couldn't get away with it, he admitted that he found her cute too. He was proud of it and wanted everyone to see it and be jealous. Elria decided to try to make him as proud of her as possible. Then he offered to unhook herself from his sleeve. The girl gripped his arm tightly, not about to let go, and reminded him that he had an artery here. Rain explained to the attendant that they were here on an invitation from the Caldwin family. The woman immediately recognized them and invited them to follow. She never thought she would walk alongside Elria the sage who had reincarnated. Not knowing anything about Mr. Rain, she was curious about his connection to the Caldwin family. Elria proudly informed him that he was her fiancé. The attendant was utterly bewildered by this statement. She congratulated them, assuming that Mr. Rain came from a noble family. The lad responded by calling himself an ordinary commoner, to which the woman could not ignore. The boys were called out by a stranger riding a dragon. It was Mistress Rufus Lilas of the Celios Federation. Rain knew that it was a country on the other side of the strait that lived in harmony with magical beasts. The attendant complimented that since this country specialized in summoning magic, a wizard's power was determined by what magical creatures he could tame. Although the conflicts with other countries were long over, their country was a deposit of magic, and they could achieve impressive results at the Magic Academy. This way, they could consolidate their advantage with other countries. The point was that the war was indirectly fought. Mrs. Rufus could use the 4 dragons that were the symbol of Celios. She was widely known as the Dragon Princess. This impressed Rain. Elria reminded him that she also possessed summoning magic as well as other magic. Then he offered to surprise him with something some other time. She stated that he would be more than surprised. They finally arrived at the place where their exam would be held. They would need to destroy that installation with magic in a limited amount of time. After a little thought, Elria asked to make the exam harder. Rain advised her not to dishonor an employee. The girl was sure it was too easy. The attendant hurriedly entered the command on the magic tablet. A training projection that simulated a magical beast appeared. As Mrs. Elria had already realized, the beast was designed based on the specimens brought to the academy. The girl was confident that she would have no difficulties with it. She was full of confidence and felt a surge of strength as she prepared to attack. Elria knew this time Rain would properly see that she hit harder. The girl's strike was so powerful that it not only destroyed the imitation magical beast, but also left behind only ashes. She felt proud of herself and knew that she would be praised. Rain recognized that it looked much brighter than before. Elria also made sure to remove the target's defense and barrier with the original strength unchanged. The guy had never seen such a strong and resource-hungry combo before. The attendant was amazed at how calmly he took it. It wasn't the first time he had seen such a display of magic. After all, 1,000 years ago, magic was much more powerful. The woman believed that the magic that Madame Elria had just released was magic of the 10th level, that is, the highest level. She had not seen anyone other than top-level magicians being able to use such magic. Rain inquired about his estimate if he could blow it away. The fire spread like a forest fire. She explained that this fire had been created with magic, and in order to put it out, magic of a level at least as high as Mistress Elria's was needed. The task was not particularly difficult for him. He had no doubt that he would get a good grade. His strength rushed like a stream toward the fire. Destroying everything in his path, he cleared the area of the fire. Elria recognized the very power of Rain, but he thought he wasn't in the best shape yet. He used to use both weapons and armor. Despite that, she thought he was the strongest. The attendant reported with great anxiety about the exam organizer's desire to see them. Eliza Lanmel reported that in their opinion they were too strong for the academy. She had heard of Elria's rare talent from the king, and she had shown more than enough today. She's very strong, but Eliza was afraid enough to kill someone. While she's here, she's only allowed to use magic up to level 5, and if she breaks that rule, she'll be expelled. As for Rain, she didn't even know who he was. The organizer couldn't understand why she didn't guess his existence. Elise was not relieved by his careless apology. Rain turned to the girl. He knew that elves were immortal, but wasn't she the same age as her past self? Elria explained that elves stop aging between the ages of 15 and 20, so you couldn't tell exactly how old she was from her, no matter how sad it was. Such is the fate of elves. Although they were speaking in whispers, the organizer heard their conversation and was indignant that they called her little. She guessed that Rain didn't use magic. He called it an ordinary blow of sufficient force. Now it was even more incomprehensible to her. Eliza hoped he could keep that power within the walls of the academy. Rain reasoned that he could hit with less than full strength, but he had little problem with it. The organizer stated that she had problems with it as well. On orders from the Caldwin family, she had to grade them accordingly. Rain replied that they could make some concessions. The main thing was to keep their marriage. Alicia had given her advance warning of this. She also pleaded guilty to underestimating them. Eliza asked if Rain would be able to hold back outside of the exams. Normally, she didn't mind a little out of bounds, but not to the extent that she did today. Otherwise, she would get very angry. She didn't think she would hear Elria and Rain's names at the same moment. This legend was known only among the elves. She had only glimpsed it from her grandfather. Elria tried to hint to the organizer to stop. Rain wondered how the elves knew their names. Eliza stated that it was not theirs, but those of the heroes who lived 1,000 years ago. The elves formed a legend about the sage's words at the moment of death. Rain demanded an explanation of exactly what that legend was. The organizer thought that he, being such a seemingly intelligent fellow, had already heard of it. He realized that he had a chance to get information from thousands of years ago. It was a legend about a hero falling in love with a wise man. The legend Eliza was about to tell was very touching. The hero, who was a human, and the elf, who was a sage, although they were enemies, they wished good for each other. They fought for 50 years to prevent as much damage as possible to both sides. But during one of the battles the sage fell ill, after which she soon passed away. When the hero learned of this, he sneaked alone into King Vegalt's castle. The hero, while in the castle, was on the verge of death from his wounds. But why did he basically go there? He said he had come to say goodbye to the sage, and Eliza was delighted with this. What but love had made him go through so much? She is sure that the sage would become happy if she heard the hero's words. The elves had many stories based on this legend. Rain thanked the organizer for the story. It seemed to him that Elria was not feeling well, so he was going to leave with her. The girl was still very embarrassed and asked not to worry about her. Eliza repeatedly asked to restrain herself from using force. She also congratulated them on passing the Vegalta Magic Academy exam. Rain reasoned that in the end the story was not so bad. It was obvious since the story had been passed down by the elves from generation to generation. Even before Elria realized that they were already in love. She didn't tell it to him because she was afraid he wouldn't like it. The boyfriend declared that she was not mistaken. It was just a legend that the elves had. He made no secret of the fact that he really came when she died, and that he came alone, wounded. He didn't want to kill little Tiana just to see her, so he would have gotten it on the way to her anyway. The girl couldn't wait to find out the most important thing, namely what he had said the last time he saw her. Rain hesitated to relay to her what he had said that minute. He claimed that he had said nothing to her and was only able to open his mouth like a fish. She did not think that a man before his death would imitate a fish. Elria demanded to tell her the truth. Guy hurriedly rushed over to tell Alicia that he had successfully passed the exams. A real celebration was held at the mansion. Alicia announced their imminent move into the academy dormitory and shifted the responsibility for Elria to Rain. Elria was shy, taciturn, and not very polite. Alicia had other concerns. Galleon pressed him to assist Elria at the academy. He knew it was very difficult for her to be in the company of strangers and attend the academy. He was going to say the most important thing. The man demanded not to touch his daughter until after the wedding. Rain realized that this was punishable by his death. Turning to the girl, Alicia whispered to her that she would have to try very hard. The ceremony to welcome the new students of Vegolt Magic Academy came. From now on, they were all attending the same academy. Alyssa hoped each of them would put in their best effort to achieve their goals. The student dormitory of the Vegolt Magic Academy. The boys were handed the key to their shared room. Turning to a staff member, Rain asked if there was anything strange about a guy and a girl sharing a room. She clarified that it was permissible for engaged nobles at the time of admission. If no special circumstances prevent them from sharing a room, they try to do so. Since the betrothed were allotted their own room, Elria was willing to live that way. Better to live with him and feel safe than with some stranger. Circumstances worked out extremely well. Alicia had just asked Rain to look after Elria. The girl declared that she was not so unselfish. The room assigned to them in the dormitory was well appointed. Elria reasoned that if she stockpiled magic power in advance, Rain would also be able to use magic items. Since the ceremony was over, the boy, feeling very hungry, offered to cook something. The girl asked if he knew how to cook. Rain knew the algorithm for cooking uncomplicated dishes, along the lines of the ones he cooked when they survived in the wilderness. Elria had once hunted rabbits if he spotted them on the battlefield. He was surprised to find that she did so as well. When Elria first joined the army, she was treated like a backup wizard. She had to eat only fruits and plants. The boy had the same problem, for if you wanted to boil water, the enemies would spot you by the column of steam. Instead of water, he replenished his thirst with squeezed juice from Budao fruit or something like that. Elria understood him. It was delicious, but she always got her clothes dirty with spilled juice. Besides, Vegolt soldiers had white uniforms. The Altine soldiers' uniforms were black, and the stains were not as noticeable. He reminded her of how she had once found where he was by a single scent. The wind was blowing directly at her, so that's why she was able to smell. Since they were finally reunited, the girl suggested they have a frugal lunch today, just like old times. Adjusted for nostalgia, it shouldn't be too bad. Besides, she could help him with the cooking. Elria suddenly thought about the fact that she hadn't cooked with anyone together since childhood. Rain guessed that she was referring to a past life when she was an elf. She remembered her mother praising her several times then, but she hadn't heard praise from anyone else since then. After stroking her head, Rain concluded that the best praise was that she was legendary generations later. Her mom would definitely be proud of her if she knew that. When the guys were done cooking, Elria inquired about what kind of child he was in that life. All he remembered was that he was very lonely. In that life, Rain was a very weak child. He was often in bed with fever, so he was a burden to his parents. In the empire of Altine where he was born, there was a gulf between the poor and the rich. Its policy was to exploit the poor and expand its lands despite its limited resources. Most of the children from the poor villages went into military service, and Ryan could not be a soldier, so he was a disappointment to his family. He was very sad about it and tried to become stronger. The fever would go down, he would go to exercise, and it would reappear. He repeated this time after time and did not notice himself transformed. Rain was insanely happy. He wasn't just on par with the others, he had become stronger than each of them. He had finally been recognized. But one day people called him the Devil of Hell. Also his mother, who was mocked for giving birth to a hell spawn, began to see him as a hell spawn. Soon after, he was given to a group of mercenaries. Even the mercenaries pitied him at first. But no matter how dangerous the battlefield was, he always dealt with his enemies with extreme ferocity and returned alive. Soon no one ever came close to him. He continued to work as a mercenary like this, trying to find others like him, but he was unsuccessful. At this rate, achieving more and more success in the military field, at one point he was hailed as a hero. You never know what life will have in store for you. She gently cupped his face with the palms of her hands and praised. The boy couldn't understand why she suddenly did that. Elria just wanted to praise him back. She admitted that it felt really good to receive praise from someone. He was alone, so he probably didn't realize it yet. Now that she is around, Rain is not alone. If he does his best, she will continue to praise him. Besides, considering her past life, she was old enough to be his older sister, so she was more suitable for this role than anyone else. Rain praised his older sister for praising him. Elria felt very embarrassed by the way he called her. The boys went into the bedroom, where there was plenty of room for two. Rain was curious to know if she minded that they would sleep in the same bed. The girl apparently didn't mind. Rain didn't mind either. He admitted that he sleeps like a murderer. Elria, on the other hand, made no secret of the fact that she was tossing and turning in her sleep. And also sometimes she gets drowsy and dozes off. Rain was willing to make herself comfortable in the hall if she felt discomfort. The girl, not wanting to be alone, wanted them to sleep together. Rain, feeling equally embarrassed, tried to remain calm. He didn't mind, but he would think of her father's expression when he went to bed. In the morning, Rain was awakened by the insistent ringing of the alarm clock. Feeling heavy, he glanced at the girl who was snuggled next to him. He was glad that he was once old. But now it was time to get up, and he tried to wake Elria. Seeing that she wasn't going to get up, he decided to send her to the bathtub to cheer her up a bit. Elria actually wanted to take a bath. While she was in the bathtub, he was going to make breakfast. But the girl wanted to take it together. Realizing that she wouldn't get up otherwise, he agreed to take a bath with her. Having prepared the water, he called Elria. Rain noticed that the girl was still sleepy and unaware of what was happening. She insisted on bathing together. Rain realized that with his stubbornness he would waste a lot of time. The boy decided to hold her hand until she climbed in and asked her to let him finally take a break. Elria, preparing to take a bath, began to undress. Rain covered her face with a towel in a panic, explaining that he had that habit when he took a bath. She didn't think he could even see anything like that. He said not to underestimate him, a hero, for he could easily realize what was around him even with his eyes closed. Elria was once again convinced that heroes were incredible. Holding out his hand to her, he asked her to take it and climb into the tub. The girl felt incredible bliss and warmth while in the tub. In saying this, she was not referring to the water, but to Rain himself. When the boys arrived at the academy, Elria noticed Rain's fatigue. He couldn't figure out whether it was good or bad that she couldn't remember anything. As soon as they entered the auditorium, there was silence. After all, Elria herself had entered it. Everyone was aware of the extraordinary talents of this charming girl who deserved to inherit the title of sage. Rain had a feeling of déjà vu. She considered herself insignificant in comparison to Rain. The students had accumulated many questions for Rain, who had cancelled the 10th level spell. He must have had some connection with the Caldwin family since he could keep Elria company. To begin with, the guy replied that he was very honored. After giving his name, Rain added that he would one day claim the Caldwin surname. Unlike everyone here, he was a commoner. Even without knowing anything about him, their praise was sincere. He was very impressed with all of them. He received support from the students. They claimed that they would recognize his strength. Just like a sage was valued regardless of her elven background, they should be tolerant of everyone who teaches magic. But still, the opposite opinion was expressed. It seemed doubtful to the man that a commoner like him could really handle. He didn't believe that a commoner could undo a 10th level spell. To him, Rain was not cool at all. Rain figured if he was really strong, then of course he would criticize him. This was Ferg, the son of the Verminen family that Rain had previously been told about by Alicia. The son of the current generation, Ferg was very talented and endowed with a huge supply of magic. If Elria were gone, all the attention would no doubt be given to him. But he was self-centered and always blamed others for everything. As a member of a prestigious family, Alicia was uncomfortable, but if he got the chance, she asked for something to be done about his temper. At the time, Rain had no idea why he was causing such an attitude. That a commoner like him had ties to the Caldwin family. Ferg called it insulting to the Caldwins who had long defended Vigalta. Rain said that if he had any doubts about his identity, he could contact Alicia for confirmation. Ferg stated that this was not the case. The mere fact that a penniless man like him was able to join this academy was outrageous. Rain said that he had passed the written and practical examinations perfectly and had received the principal's approval. As for the school policy about magic, no matter who you are, you must be trained in the magic left behind by the sage. Ferg was annoyed by his grandfather's attitude. Ferg's friends advised him to stop. Provoking someone related to the Caldwin family might affect the Verminen family. But Ferg, grinning, called him a common servant. Rain realized that he had missed the most important detail at the very beginning. Drawing Elria to him, he called himself her fiancé. Leaving the daredevil alone with his thoughts, he motioned for her to take their seats. He took great pleasure in the sight of his perplexed face. Elria had already managed to forget his bad behavior. Rain asked not to think of it as bad behavior. People's excessive insolence could lead to the death of their allies, so it was better to insult them at once than to do it later. Elria began to realize why his country's soldiers were so obedient. The student, seeing that the boys were looking for a seat, offered to sit next to him. There was no one around, so he was rather bored. The guy's name was Weasel Blanche. Rain let him call him whatever he wanted. Elria felt as if she had heard of him before. This didn't surprise Weasel, since his family were magical equipment engineers. The magical items Ms. Caldwin used, like her staff, were made by his sister. The girl asked him to tell her that she used it very carefully. He was sure his sister would be pleased. When she first received the order, she jumped with happiness. Elria also let him call her by her first name. He came to the point where he would call her Miss Elria. The girl was interested in the reason why Weasel was taking the mage test, considering that there were classes for magic engineers. The guy classified himself as a practical person. Besides being a mage, Weasel's first priority was to recognize not only himself, but also his surroundings, and thus to create a more practical magic item. That was his goal. Depending on the person, he could prove to be a nuisance, but he didn't care. Rain noted that his desire to create a good magic item was in line with the school's ideology to study and develop magic. The guys who complained just didn't understand it. Elria agreed with his opinion and emphasized that it was necessary to pay proper attention to study. When they both expressed such thoughts, it somehow really did seem significant to him. Weasel had heard that Rain had cancelled Miss Elria's 10th level magic and wanted to see his magic item. Elria explained that Rain's magic powers were a bit special. His mana flow was malfunctioning and he couldn't use magic items. It was hard to believe. To be sure, Weasel offered to destroy the item he had with him. Rain could not afford to break it. Weasel assured him that it was spare. Moreover, as a magic engineer, he wanted to know under what circumstances a magic item would break, and he couldn't help himself. He informed the guys that this magic item was made by him personally. He let different people try it out, but not just for ordinary use. Its durability allowed it to withstand heavy use and consistent use. However, Rain had no trouble breaking it. Weasel was so amazed that his glasses shattered. It was one of his best works. He did not think that Rain would break it so easily. He asked Elria's opinion about this phenomenon as someone who excelled in magic. The girl thought Rain's magic was different from the others. Weasel believed that what she said was the truth, because the protective magic and engraving were damaged. As it seemed to him, it was also due to the fact that the magic item was broken physically as well. He felt it necessary to analyze it and observe its breakage a couple more times. He still couldn't say anything about it, let alone come to a conclusion. It could be said that it was completely uncharted territory for him. Weasel couldn't imagine how Rain had even managed to get his hands on such magical power. Rain replied that it had been so long ago that he no longer remembered anything. He turned his attention to the suspicious girl who had been eavesdropping on them and, once spotted, banged her head on the table. She thought it unnecessary to give her name. When Rain suggested that they call the guards, the girl admitted her guilt in a hurry. Her name was Millis Lambat, 17 years old and from the outlying village of Noaberg. Her only friends were sheep. Since she came here on scholarship, she thought of the possibility of making human friends. Rain allowed Elria to resolve this situation. She liked this girl for her energy. Rain had to promote her from being a suspicious person to a classmate. Millis was delighted. She spent a sleepless night thinking about the performance and really appreciated it. Rain inquired as to the reason why she was eavesdropping on their conversation. The girl explained that all the chatter didn't fit in her head, so she was looking for people she could turn to. Rain didn't find it a big deal, because you could just turn to people as usual. For Millis, things were not so easy. Talking about last night's party or this year's harvest were different things. She didn't understand how a simple person of her type could join in such a thing. Rain offered to say that there were so many sheep this year that she broke some shears. Millis had also heard that he, too, had been born on the outskirts. The boy didn't consider his home as backwoods as Noaberg. The girl then inquired where he was from. Learning that he was from Ares, she said that it was the same thing. There are only forests, mountains, and rivers there. Rain pointed out that in Noaberg there are only mountains. Millis stated their local features like clean water and sheep. Rain had much to boast about in response. They had high-quality timber and orange farms, and they had also recently discovered a new species of squirrel. Finding no other cause for pride, she spoke again of sheep. Millis, pouncing on it, explained that at this rate she would become a loner. At the very least, she needed a countryman friend. Covering Rain with her own, Elria caught the girl. She decided to become her friend, and it touched her deeply. After introducing herself, Weasel noticed that with him, Millis could set aside all formalities. Rain was as ready to get along with her as two country folk. That she had made 3 human friends was a great accomplishment for her. But still, the teacher was late. The boys hypothesized the likelihood of the problem that had arisen. The teacher could not be lost, for even Millis could find the right classroom. However, she was already hurrying to her students. Her appearance was very spectacular. Just a little more, and Eliza would be angry at her for being late. The classroom teacher greeted the students. The class leader of the group was a mage of special rank, Alma Kanos. Mages of special rank were capable of using 10th level magic. She obtained this rank for being able to destroy a huge destructive level monster by herself. The disciples didn't understand why a legendary special rank holder was their leader. Last week, the king himself had given her orders, and she was also part of the large-scale takeover of the dragon nest. The woman was trying to pacify the class. She was asked to give an answer to a question about the king's orders. Alma said that she had recently fulfilled them. She had been asked to become a teacher by the king of Vigalta and the principal. She was also from this academy, so she knew how things worked. She hoped they were in some way anticipating learning from her. Now she was going to quickly explain what they would do next. There were 8 beginner classes, with 40 students in each class. During the year, they would be evaluated both individually and as a whole class, and then the teachers would calculate their average score. If their score was above average, they would qualify as a mage and be able to graduate. The most important part was the class evaluation. Even if they could get the highest individual score, in case their class failed, they would not be able to become a mage. It was also one of their duties as mages not to dwell only on themselves, but to prioritize group work. Pointing at the furry girl, she asked her to tell them about the duties of a mage. Nil is named investigating crimes with magic and defeating dangerous animals and monsters. The girl answered correctly. But that wasn't all. Supplementing her answer, the teacher said it was evacuating the locals to a safe area, securing the evacuation route, isolating the danger zone, conducting rescue operations, and many more. In order to be prepared for any situation, the team should consist of several people, perhaps even several dozen, for large-scale operations. It became clear that this was a shared responsibility for the entire class. Rain hoped that there would be no dead weight in this class. Alma also reported that individual evaluations would be conducted once a month, and would consist of a real battle, and a situational exam where their reactions to various incidents would be tested. The class evaluation would be conducted 4 times a year. It contained a comprehensive exam with different environments where they would compete against other classes and even schools. She asked to keep it in mind. The teacher ran her eyes over the study guide, which contained lectures on magical theory, monster habits, characteristics, and basic abilities. She called it torture and suggested that we move on to practice. The boys moved to the place where they would hold the practice duel. It was a separate space created by a magical object. Everything around it was real. Alma reported that this magic item was created by the principal. Unless she cancelled it, they couldn't go out, and no one outside could interfere. She asked if there was a brave man among them who would be willing to engage her in battle, provided she was restrained. The students were hesitant to enter the duel with a special rank. But if no one volunteered, they all wouldn't get out of here. In that case, one student agreed to be her opponent. Ferg declared that he could use 7th level spells and had been training for magical battles since childhood. His introduction sounded promising. Seeing a strong opponent in front of her, she decided to be more serious. The boy asked in horror what exactly that could mean. What the teacher meant was that she would probably break a couple of his bones. Ferg, in fear, hastily refused. However, there was a man who did not back down before the powerful mentor. Elria Caldwin decided to test herself. Alma had previously heard about her from the headmaster, that she was only allowed to use spells up to the 5th level. She was willing to adjust to her, but the girl insisted that she would not hold back. More importantly, whether Elria should hold back. Alma didn't hesitate to unleash a powerful magic attack on her opponent, which was not easy to resist. But the girl's defense was very easy. She formed a special magical barrier that, unlike physical attacks, dispersed magical energy so that it repelled even magical attacks. Being impressed by her magic, the teacher wanted her to demonstrate something else to her. She let her use anything but do it as if she was fighting her for real. Turning to the boys, Rain asked those still able to move to remove those unable to move away. He warned them of the likelihood of getting hurt if they stood too close. Weasel, like Rain, became curious about the future course of the battle. Miliz was shaking with fear, so much so that she could not move an inch. Elria deftly repelled all of the teacher's attacks, showing neither fear nor hesitation. Alma was perplexed as to how lower-level magic could compete with higher-level magic. Weasel agreed with the instructor. It was hard to admit, but Elria's magic produced dozens of spells simultaneously. But even though she only used lower-level spells, her magic could resist the spells of a higher-level teacher, which was supposedly impossible. Rain explained that she didn't cast spells directly, but used spells to cast even more. The number of lower-level spells she could use with her supply of magic was about 1,000. Then the huge amount of mana that Weasel measured with his magic item was the number of spells cast and combined. Elria used a bunch of spells and combined them into one. It was called multiple deployment. In other words, she used as much magic as there were stars in the sky to suppress and neutralize it. Weasel was curious if Rain had ever seen the full potential of this spell. The boy answered in the affirmative. He had never taken his eyes off her. She was brighter than anyone else, so he was crazy about her. The teacher was doing fine with all her spells, but, the girl supposed, she still hadn't really fought. Alma realized that it would be rude to keep holding back. She declared that it was time for march. He was a death brigade composed of the undead. The teacher offered to defeat this black flag as if her life depended on it. Rain was surprised when he heard about the black flag. Elria asked Alma how she knew about it, but the teacher did not give a specific answer to the question that worried her. The girl stated that there was only one person who could have said those words, so she had a couple of questions for her. It seemed to Millis that Elria was beginning to look more gloomy than before. Weasel believed that it was because of the instructor's words. When the boys wanted to ask Rain what was going on, he was not there. The guy took on the huge monster, giving it a serious fight back. Rain apologized for interfering, but he couldn't just sit back while someone used his own words. The instructor assumed he was another unusual one. He definitely didn't use any magic, yet he sent her skeleton flying so easily. Rain introduced himself to the sensei, giving her a condition. If she answered his question, he would gladly answer hers. Because it was so old it was almost completely erased, so he didn't even notice at first. But after that phrase, Rain was sure. He asked why she was holding the banner of Altine. The teacher expressed complete incomprehension of his question. She didn't feel obligated to give him an answer unless he answered first. Suddenly someone's perplexed voice was heard. The principal had been watching the whole time. She could see and hear everything Alma was doing. Eliza was extremely displeased that she had so easily used a level 10 spell against a student. She didn't create this magic item for the purpose of doing so. If Alma broke it, she would be furious. The teacher offered to discuss Riene's matter later since they were interrupted. In any case, they all needed to dedicate themselves to magic and practice. She was setting the boys up to fight to become as strong just like them. The students thought it was impossible, losing their confidence. Since they had all worked hard to get into this academy, she encouraged them not to give up now before they even started. Since the boys will be studying with her for the rest of the year, they will all be stronger than anyone by following her. Alma lifted the boys who were still unconscious, going to teach them one of the most important basics of any mage. She told all the students to run until they were unconscious. After a grueling run, the girls enjoyed a dip in the warm waters of the hot springs. In her village, Millis went to the onsen every day to wash herself, so its absence was very much felt here. Elria thanked her friend for calling her here. Millis, in turn, was grateful to her for helping her get here. The following narrative recounted what had happened an hour earlier. Alma was expressing her displeasure that the boys had no stamina at all. She pointed to a couple of students who were an indivisible unit who were still fine. Rain had had time to get used to this kind of thing. Since no one else could move, Elria was prepared to carry them with transportation magic. This was technically a 6th level spell. The tactic worked successfully. The students, exhausted and soaked, needed a bath. The teacher suggested going to the dormitory's common bath. Millis suggested that Elria join them. In order to borrow Rain, the teacher insisted that she not refuse. The girl had many things on her mind. For example, their relationship or that banner. Millis suddenly thought of Elria being very unfair. She had silky, smooth hair, and so was her skin. Not only was she cute, her whole body was beautiful. Burning with shame, Elria covered her mouth in a hurry. She had a topic she wanted to discuss with her. The girl had an idea to give one person a gift, and she wanted to know what her friend thought would be a good gift. Millis immediately guessed that she had an idea for a gift for Rain. Everyone could understand it at a glance, and Elria had an aura of love for him. The girl thought that she didn't show it at all. She wanted to give him a gift anyway to celebrate their entry into the academy, but she never did. Millis had only met the two of them today, so she didn't think she could give a good answer. Still, she offered to give him something he liked as a gift. Elria assumed his only hobbies were sharpening stones and oil. Millis was confident that Rain would be pleased with such a gift. As a girl from the outskirts, she too enjoyed caring for her tools. Although Elria had originally thought of gear and armor, Millis thought that instead of consumables, a more durable item would be better. However, Elria had no ideas. Even though they had known each other for over 50 years, adding age from her past life, she was almost 200 years old, but that was too much of a predicament. The girl sank into the water, tormented by her thoughts, startling her friend. Millie suggested thinking about the moments when he was happy. Upon reflection, Elria remembered him being joyful when he fought, but she denied his dependence on battles. When he fought her, he always laughed and seemed to enjoy himself. Elria wanted to give him something that would make him laugh, like at times like this. She expressed her gratitude to her friend, who was delighted with her sweet act, for her support. Millie realized that she should appreciate this girl and envied Rain. She promised to support her in any situation. Alma apologized for the wait. She had to listen to the principal's endless scolding. Rain was not going to drag out what he was so concerned about. He demanded an explanation of where she got the Altine banner. She assumed Altine was the name of a country. Rain saw that she feigned ignorance after actively waving her magical object. She claimed to be telling the truth. What she wanted to know, however, was why he immediately mistook the cloth for a banner. From this he concluded that she was not to be taken for a banner. She recognized that this was exactly the case. Just as he had said, that cloth was indeed intended for a certain banner, but only the people who had inherited the Kano's surname knew about it. She wanted to know who he was. The boy couldn't answer that question, but she could ask anything but that and find answers on her own. She thought he was thinking of something good. In other words, the choice was in Alma's hands. She could recognize his identity based on his answers. But, on the other hand, if he could answer her questions without divulging anything, he could earn her trust. Alma asked his opinion about methodical people. Rain thought they were serious and diligent. Even if they weren't docile, they weren't bad guys. If he had to choose someone to be his subordinate, such people were the most suitable. After this question, a number of others arose. It was time to ask the last question. She had no doubt that he would be able to answer her. Would His Excellency remember her name? Rain knew there was only one person who addressed him as His Excellency, not General. He had no trouble recognizing her as Liaf. He answered directly as described in the memorandum. Alma explained that it was the name of her ancestor. He was the one who created that memorandum and died. He served His Excellency as a standard bearer and was with him until the very end. Rain was impressed that that guy even left the memorandum for millennia. She considered it an indication of how much her ancestor adored His Excellency. As they had agreed, she wouldn't ask anything else, such as how someone who had lived millennia ago was still alive. Rain suggested that they stop there. That was the reason why he wanted to talk. He assumed she knew about Altine, but Alma claimed otherwise. She could say the same about the banner. It had been inherited along with the memorandum. It said nothing about Altine. Guy was concerned about the mention of the hero or Rain Frieden. It was technically there, she said, but had been found through magical research regarding elves and oral tradition. Rain hesitated as there was no mention in the memorandum. Lai had always called Rain His Excellency, but sometimes he called him hero, and it was not mentioned in the memorandum. He concluded that someone was deliberately trying to erase the existence of a hero. Logically, it was impossible to manipulate the personal memorandum, but in reality, irrational things were happening. Rain couldn't understand why this still existed between the elves. Alma thought that the reason might have been due to oral tradition. After all, elves live a long time. They had always spread information without any medium, just passing on the story by word of mouth. Rain remembered that elves and humans had been very close millennia ago. It became clear that at that time it was deemed important enough to pass on by word of mouth. They wouldn't have told humans about it without thinking. At that time, even though they were no longer there, the oral tradition continued to exist as a tale. He urged Alma from now on to tell him if anything happened. Guy was confident that she knew considerably more about the story. She was amazed at his courage to give an order to a special rank like that. Rain noticed that her ancestors respected and loved His Excellency. The girl thought about the likelihood of Elria being like him. He left it to her imagination. It wasn't hard for her to guess that she had recently picked a fight with a real sage. From now on, the hero would be counting on Alma. After talking to her, several days have passed. The day after tomorrow, the situational exams will begin. Millie's asked if the boys had plans for tomorrow's day off before the exams. Weasel wanted to go home and take care of her magic items. Rain advised her that despite Elria's praise for her magic control, she should still work on her combat skills. After receiving a stern reprimand, Millie's explained that she wanted to have fun, like the whole species of women who couldn't live without reward. She hoped for Elria's support. However, the latter dozed off, leaning against the back of a chair. Weasel couldn't believe that she was sleeping so soundly. While researching magic, she always fell asleep later than Rain, and he was a little worried. Millie's took a sympathetic attitude toward her friend. Knowing her, it was possible that she was just making an effort as a sage heiress, or she was just doing it to leave behind something worthy. Rain began to suspect that she knew something about something. Instead of answering, the girl moved on to the more important topic of his excessive friendship with Alma. Weasel also noticed that she even called Rain his excellency. The boy explained that it was a nickname. Ferg was so thoroughly annoyed by Miliz's behavior that he couldn't help himself. Not only was everyone flattering her, but she also caused a commotion in the cafeteria. The girl apologized, but he intended to show her how to do it. When she asked forgiveness from one who is above her in status, she should bow down with her forehead on the ground. Offended by this, Miliz felt that having apologized for the noise, there was no reason to go that far. Ferg was about to show the commoner that status was not their only difference. However, there was someone who couldn't let him get away with it. Ferg declared that she was not worthy of using the great magic of a sage. Rain covered Miliz with himself. He dispelled his blow by calling him a boy and thus insulting him. Rain asked if he understood the consequences of his action. Ferg said he was merely trying to teach a commoner a lesson. Since he didn't understand, Rain decided to explain. Magic is something that has taken many lives, so wielding it and using it on someone means that you are willing to be killed. Ferg mentioned the need to earn the right to use a sage's great magic. Unlike him, that sage risked everything to conjure. Since he wanted to talk about himself, Rain recommended to achieve something without counting on his family's fame. If he wasn't satisfied with that, he could stop taking offense and show his proud side already. But if he was not capable of doing that, he should know his place. Ferg didn't understand the lesson, so Rain decided to teach him a lesson. He broke his magic item into 2 pieces. After that, Rain chased him away. He was worried about Miliz and hoped she was okay. She asked him to do all the cool stuff when Elria woke up. The girl actually slept through the whole thing. Miliz managed to wake her up. She got up from the chair and snuggled up to Rain and fell asleep on him. The boy was forced to leave with her first. After saying goodbye to the boys, he carried her to the dormitory. He didn't know what she was doing, but asked her not to wear herself out. In her sleep, Elria murmured that she wanted Rain to be happy like before. But finally coming to her senses, she realized that he was carrying her in his arms. She thought she should try a little harder. Then he advised her to do it in moderation without even asking why. Rain didn't think she was hiding anything from him or doing anything dangerous. As long as he was around, she could relax and do whatever she wanted. From actual combat to reactions in various conditions, the situational exam determined each student's grade. The exam was held in a special place where all 8 classes would be able to gather, and this place was managed by the academy, a huge forested area. Behind this fence was a dangerous area inhabited by monsters. Monsters were easily born in places imbued with mana. Then, after a long period of mating with other beasts, their numbers and habitat area continued to grow even now. For today's exam, they would enter an area of at least E rank. There were many small to medium-sized monsters. The medium-sized monsters had already been dealt with by the teachers. Alma warned that this place was still dangerous. Here they could be injured by their carelessness and pride. They could also be killed. Another teacher proceeded to explain the essence of the situational exam. Their scenario was to rescue people who had mistakenly strayed into the danger zone. Several mannequins were located within the danger zone. The students had to find, retrieve, and bring them in a certain amount of time. Once they brought them to the exit, the exam would be over. As they could guess, the more dummies they brought, the higher their score would be. One student wondered that if the situational exam was needed to grade them individually, should they prioritize their grade and go it alone? Alma left this without comment. The most important thing in this exam was to accomplish the goal. In other words, to guarantee salvation, so there was a point in working together for salvation. That was the end of her explanation. They had 30 minutes left before the beginning. Before that time, the students could discuss things among themselves. Rain suggested that the boys decide their next steps. Weasel knew that he and Miliz would be dead weight, so he thought it was better for them to split up. But Rain needed their help. Elria was not involved. Miliz was taken aback by such a statement and realized that he was on a completely different level. The guy explained that the purpose of the exam was rescue and the dummies couldn't move. But what if there were people in their place? Miliz suggested that someone would have been very frightened. Weasel speculated they were simply injured and therefore could not move. Rain agreed with their opinion. It would be necessary to calm the frightened people and take care of their injuries. Plus they would have to carry them to safety. And doing all that alone was incredibly difficult, especially from the fact that Rain couldn't use magic. He couldn't take care of the dummies, so this task is impossible for him. Weasel realized that those mannequins were also magic items, and it wouldn't be surprising if they used some kind of mechanism. Miliz thought about the chance of them not being able to take them until first aid. It was also possible that there were hidden dummies and it might take a lot of people to find them. That's why Rain will take care of the monsters, Weasel will carry them with his magic item, and Millies will have to deal with the mechanism. Rain thought this was the perfect strategy. Millies was amazed that the principal had ordered Elria to do everything herself. She said it would be hard to evaluate others while she was around. Elria also agreed with Rain's idea. However, Ferg decided to tease his rivals before the exam. When Rain called him a boy again, he asked him not to do that since the age difference between them was not that big. Rain asked why he came here so quickly. Ferg thought that the purpose of the exam is not just saving dummies, there is another. Instructor Alma said that there were no medium-sized monsters in the danger zone. But she didn't mention anything about a big monster. Whoever can subdue this monster will get the highest grade. The guys weren't going to listen to him until the end. Weasel suggested to think logically, and then he would realize that the instructors didn't even know whether they could do it or not, so there was no way they would arrange something like that. Ferg claimed superior strength to handle a big monster. Rain remarked that this magic item is very short. Ferg stated that he had broken it himself. Verminon's engineers were able to fix it yesterday. Rain assumed they had good skills. No need to overstretch and break it again. Ferg's comrades felt embarrassed by his behavior and tried to get him away as quickly as possible. Even though he was disgraced in front of everyone, he still had the courage to defy Rain. Elria realized that the Verminons had many achievements in conquering monsters. They must have put too much effort into it. Before parting ways, Elria asked him and the others to be more careful, just as he asked her to be more careful. Millies was not happy to see the two flirting before the exam began. Weasel suggested leaving them alone and ignoring them as they were strong and had discretion. In the forest, the boys were faced with many dangers. A huge monster rushed at Rain with a roar, releasing its claws. But the boy reacted instantly, gathering his strength and swinging his foot. He kicked the monster with such power that it flew into the air and flew straight into a massive tree. Rain, who took it down with one kick, said that although it was big, as a monster it was quite weak. Still, he tried to hold back so as not to leave any traces of blood, as the smell of blood could lure other monsters and make it difficult to escape. Millies was worried about whether Elria could handle so many monsters. Rain was confident that she could probably defeat them all with first-level spells, and she could also single-handedly defeat an average person using martial arts techniques. Millies couldn't believe how such a cute and fragile person could be capable of that. During the millennium full of peace and tranquility, specialized battle magic, swordsmanship, and martial arts had ceased to develop. Weasel thought Rain's movements were interesting. Glowing at the compliment, the boy decided to show him some more. Weasel also liked to fight at close range. It also worked well in public. Weasel was happy to take him up on his offer and listen to recommendations. Millies thought that this kind of action towards people was a bit cruel. Rain suggested just asking Elria. She would be able to move differently if she learned some self-defense techniques. Weasel, noticing something, hurriedly stopped his comrades. He discovered a cave up ahead. He didn't see any monsters nearby. The surrounding area was empty. Rejoicing at this, Rain assumed that there was a dummy inside the cave. Millies was amazed at this certainty. The boy reasoned logically. He suggested imagining a situation in which she had hurt herself running away from a monster and wanted to find a safe place, and there might have been dummies inside. So, the team approached the cave. Taking on the most difficult task, Rain went ahead, instructing Weasel to keep watch and Millies to support them. Advancing inside, he found 5 mannequins at once. Their number was understandable, since the scenario had them fleeing in groups. Rain left the rest to the boys. Weasel had detected a few areas of mana, and thought that they would dissipate if 2 or more people were involved. It was just as Rain had said. Examining the mannequin, Millies touched it. Suddenly, the mannequin came into motion due to an activated mechanism. A timed marking appeared on its body. Weasel thought that this mannequin was mortally wounded and the timer was showing the time in which they should save it. The girl proceeded to treat it in a hurry. In the end, Elria recognized her healing magic. However, something went wrong. In fear, Millies screamed even louder than the dummy. She hoped that if it was a wound, the healing magic would work. Rain noticed that the problem might have been the first aid order and suggested checking the wound or the dummy. Weasel guessed that the place where the mana flows were accumulating was the wound itself. There were only 5 minutes left to administer first aid. Rain urged Millies to be calm and attentive so that he could explain the order of operations to her. He asked Weasel to hurry up and check the mana accumulation. The first thing Rain told her to conjure an antidote and use cooling magic. By then, Weasel had already dispelled the mana accumulation. Continuing to support the girl, Rain explained to her to use a cloth to keep the injured man from biting his tongue. If he was exhausted from being wounded, he was on the verge of death. He gave her the main task of trying to stop the blood, if the wound was on his thigh, to raise it so that it was above his heart. After that, she was to check the open wound more closely again and use healing magic. The girl successfully accomplished the task. Everything was all right now, and she exhaled with relief. Rain praised the boys for their work. Weasel thought they had done well because of Ms. Millis, but Rain assigned special importance to his role because he had helped Millis emotionally. Weasel suddenly inquired whether Rain had seen people on death's doorstep. His instructions were so precise. The way he explained everything gave the feeling that he had seen a real dying person. He turned out to be right. Rain saw those who could be saved and those who could no longer be saved. Even though they were just mannequins, he considered the work they had done to be commendable. That is why he was grateful to them for saving them. Millis was clearly concerned about something. She spotted the group walking in their direction and carrying someone on their backs. Rain recognized them as the boy Ferg and his friends. Weasel advised that he should hurry to call for the 3 men. He thought they were badly wounded. Also, something was moving in the woods. Running out to meet the boy, Rain led them into the cave. He was amazed that Ferg had dragged them on his back the whole way. Once safe, he asked for an explanation of what had happened. Staying in a state of panic, Ferg could not give a definite answer. He didn't know what kind of monster it was, and he couldn't imagine there would be one here. The situation was alarming. The creature that was approaching them was clearly different from the other monsters. Rain, without a moment's hesitation, rushed towards it. He shouted to his comrades to pick up the injured and carry them to the depths of the cave. Ferg, unable to move, recognized the monster that had attacked them. Rain barely had time to drag him away and thus save him from being struck. The creature was too big to get any farther, but it was only a matter of time. Rain assumed that it was Ferg's crew that had put up a fight with him, but the latter claimed otherwise. It was true that he thought the academy would prepare something, so scouted around a bit. When they actually met the monster, it froze in horror. Valk and Lucas covered and protected him. He regretted what happened after. Because of him trying to do something unnecessary to find a big monster, his friends had gotten hurt. Rain didn't understand why he was crying. Against all odds, he was able to escape, didn't abandon his friends, and didn't run away in despair. He could be proud of that. Rain instructed Weasel to conjure a barrier after he left the cave. Ferg was stunned to learn of Rain's intention to engage in battle with this incredible monster. Rain guessed that this creature was immune to magic. He knew he wouldn't die, he would just win, like the hero he was. 1,000 years ago, chaos and confusion reigned. The cause was the appearance of terrible monsters. The troops were angry at Altine, who sent magical creatures immune to physical and magical attacks. Amidst all this turmoil, the majestic figure of a hero stood out as he marched forward. The warriors didn't understand why this guy was so brave, fearlessly stepping towards the monster. The young lad had single-handedly saved Altine and Vigalta from danger. He was bestowed the title of hero. Returning to our time, Rain told us that this monster was called the Armored Dragon. It fed on ore veins such as gold and magical ores, which gave it the ability to reflect magic. He was the main enemy of the mage. Ferg was puzzled how he possessed this information. Rain explained that a lot of events had happened. Ferg thought it was reckless and that they should wait for help from the academy. Rain could rely on Elria, who could easily handle it if she came. But they didn't have time to wait. He hoped Weasel had brought a magic item that could create a barrier. The guy had brought a couple of them, but something was bothering him. Turning to Millis, Rain asked to continue healing the wounded, knowing she could handle it. Looking toward the boys in need of urgent help and gathering her courage, the girl assured him that she would save them. After that, she asked Rain to send the monster into the stratosphere, and then the boy set off to meet the monster. Without wasting a second, he slipped out of the shadows of the cave. His movements were swift and precise. With a wave of his hand, he slammed his fist into the monster's face with fury. The armored dragon flew off a considerable distance with a loud roar. It was much harder than Rain had thought, who had never realized it since he had been using a sword. It had been a long time since Rain had encountered this monster, so he didn't remember it very well. However, he realized that they were all weak compared to the sage. The guy was much tougher than the big guy. A single blow was enough to turn the monster to the ground. Rain had expected to defeat it much faster, but he realized that it would be a difficult task. The monster roared, calling for reinforcements. The boy still remembered the boys he had to ensure a safe escape. It would hurt if he had to fight them all with his bare hands. However, someone's tremendous power intervened in the battle and turned the dragon. Elria rushed to the rescue, apologizing. Alma told her to bring the students as they had spotted some unknown monsters. She went there and found 10 armored dragons. The academy had a shortage of people, so her restraints were removed. Rain remarked that it would benefit them and suggested that they take Millis and the others out of the cave. Elria turned to Millis after making sure she was okay. She announced her intention to ferry them and asked her to tell Weasel to maintain the barrier. She made sure all the kids in their class were safe. Rain was surprised that she had dragged them along with the cave. The girl didn't want to hear that from someone who was trying to defeat an armored dragon with her bare hands. Alma hurriedly expressed her bewilderment that she had sent an entire cave to them. Elria was worried about the condition of her classmates. According to the instructor, everyone who took the exam today was in place. Some of them were injured, but nothing fatal. All the teachers had already returned. The girl informed her of her and Rain's willingness to destroy all the armored dragons in the area in order to protect the students. The teacher insisted on not taking such a risky step, but the boys didn't even think of shying away from their goal. Elria offered to give their best. She was going to help Rain destroy all the dragons in an instant. The girl had always thought about it, how to make it so that he could give his best. Elria created a powerful magic sword that would be his companion in heavy combat. She was confident that he could withstand with her magic. It was his belated gift to celebrate his entry into the academy. Laughing, Rain thought it was so like her. To think of gifting a sword made by magic, only she was capable of doing that. Elria thought it would make him happy. The boy replied that it wasn't enough to describe his feelings. Her magic, which is always by his side in battles, would surely be able to withstand his mana. Now that the girl thought about it, this was the first time they had engaged in battle like this. Now they were fighting together, having a united front 1,000 years in the future. Since Ryan had received such a wonderful gift, he was going to show her his true strength. Though it had been a long time, his body had never forgotten. The boy had shown Elria what it meant to fight seriously. He split space, creating a deep rift in the earth and destroying everything around him, leaving nothing alive. After the battle, the sword created by Elria disappeared. It wasn't a sword that could always be used. But despite that, Rain was very happy. He felt very good when he was finally able to give his best. But it was much more fun for him to fight with her as she did with him. Watching the view from the sky, Alma imagined Elisa's reaction when she found out. She gave Elria permission to use all her power. His Excellency did a good job of wiping the monsters into powder too. But who gave them permission to change the terrain? The boys admitted that they were just engrossed in the battle. She understood what they were getting at. The principal urged Alma to disagree with them. She was outraged that the boys had torn down the exam site so easily. Both of them, while admitting their guilt, replied that Elria had created the sword out of magic and Rain had then used it to tear the place apart. Next time, the girl decided to make a sword that could be used more than once. Eliza emphasized that she could report it upstairs, so she asked for some sympathy. She asked Alma about the reinforcement reports she was sending her. The instructor replied that some of them had been torn off. Inexplicably, that monster was able to reduce the damage of her magic by half. According to the witnesses, almost all of their magic was either reflected or dispelled. Not only was there a problem with magic in that area, but her magic had also become unstable. Even the movement of her death brigade was slowed down because of that monster, and it easily destroyed it. Eliza pointed out that it was quite bad that it was able to affect even a 10th level spell. The principal instructed her to send out a second call for reinforcements, then she would find experts to investigate. Alma thought of the need to survey the students again. She heard that Ferg had encountered a monster and almost engaged in battle. The guy said that while exploring, they came across an unknown monster. Valk and Lucas were with it. They tried to protect it and so they were injured. From its appearance, he realized that it was some kind of dragon. Ferg wiped off his scent by walking through the hallwalker grass, and to keep them from being surrounded, he burned some trees. Then he decided to bring those two into the cave to wait for help. She noted that he made the best decisions, even in such a dangerous situation. The instructor sent the students to a temporary rest area, voicing her decision not to grade this test. As for the incident, she asked them not to talk about it to outsiders. The monsters in the area had been dealt with beforehand. All the school instructors had observed the area, but no one had noticed those monsters. Even before that, she reported that the teachers had dealt with the middle monsters beforehand. In other words, the monsters came out of nowhere. She led the boys to think things over and conduct a thorough investigation of the case. Rain reflected on the fact that the armored dragon's invasion was not a simple incident. It meant that there might have been a criminal inside the school. Alma urged not to talk about it in public until the investigation was complete. She released everyone except Rain and Elria. The boys were reminded that they were students with their own needs, but she had special plans for them. The instructor wanted to talk to Elria. Rain thought that Elria knew more about the armored dragons than he did. At that time, dealing with them was very difficult. This was the first time Alma had heard the name of this monster. At the very least, she had never fought a monster that could affect magic. More importantly, Ferg said he didn't know anything about it. Not only about the monsters they had exterminated. The Verminen family collected all kinds of information about all the monsters of every area. In this country, they had the most information about monsters. The teacher asked if one should address Elria in a respectful manner. It was fine with the girl if she continued to address her informally. Alma asked her to tell her who the armored dragon was. She told her that it was a dragon-like monster that fed on minerals. These minerals formed the shell of the creature. It was usually not strong enough to repel strong magic. But if they were capable of even dispersing magic, then just like 1,000 years ago, the chances that someone had intentionally fed them magic ore were quite high. The instructor was becoming increasingly unclear. According to history, there were monsters capable of affecting magic. She knew of them, but they no longer existed in their time. Because of the threat of magic, they were exterminated to the point of extinction. In other words, armored dragons should not have existed in this era. They were met at the base by the guys waiting for them after a long conversation. Rain thought about what these two could be told about them. Turns out Elria had thought the same thing. The friends were enjoying the camping-like atmosphere. Millis was happy that they were both okay. Elria was grateful for her worries. Weasel reported that both of Verminen's companions had survived thanks to Millis's healing. Barely had they remembered him. Ferg strode resolutely toward their table. He stood, almost threateningly, in front of Millis. The guy had come to thank her for saving Valk and Lucas. Rain gave the boy a satisfied look. A few days later, Rain once again had to go to great lengths to wake Elria. He declared that if she was late, Alicia would not only be furious, she would cancel their engagement. The girl demanded a hug. Instead of him carrying her on his back again, she wanted a hug. Time continued to pass rapidly. Rain knelt down on one knee and spread his arms to let her into his embrace. He left her uniform in the room with her to change. She, not yet fully awake, failed to properly button her blouse. Elria asked Rain to help her. He, finding himself in that position, quickly managed the buttons. He again had to carry the girl on his back. As they entered the classroom, they were greeted with applause. The students marveled that these two had defeated the huge dragon in the exam. Moreover, they even defended the others on their own. Rain wondered who had become the peddler of information. Millis uttered Ferg's name. When everyone was discussing what had happened to those dragons in the exam, he said that they were the ones who had defeated them. Rain, in view of the fact that the lesson was about to start, suggested postponing the conversation. Weasel and Millis noticed that the boys were late today, and Elria was out of sorts. Rain grudgingly replied that today was even worse than usual. When the girl woke up, she was surprised to find Rain quite close. The boy noticed that she was the one sitting next to him. He reassured her by telling her that this was not new. She usually came to her senses by the time they were in class. Elria had no idea what she was doing. Rain told her that she would fall back asleep after she got up, stroking his head while still in a half-sleep. Coming out of the closet in just her underwear, Elria started pounding him with her fists in a panic. But then Millis assured her that she had covered Weasel's ears. Even so, she thought, the two of them flirted a lot in their private time. Weasel thought that flirting in private was the norm. If anything, it was like they were used to it. Rain wondered if they did anything similar to flirting. Millis couldn't understand the two of them. Weasel was sure they were keeping in moderation, for it was good for married couples to have a great relationship. Both stated in one voice that they were not married but engaged. He told them not to synchronize only at such odd moments. The guys made known their intention to tell them some things. The four friends found themselves alone in the classroom after class was over. Rain told them that he was the same man whom the people of Altine honored as a hero, and Elria introduced herself as an elf from Vegalta who was called the Sage. They were reborn a millennium later, many events had taken place, and now they were engaged. Millis and Weasel took the news without much surprise. Rain thought that they would not have believed something so strange. Millis replied that now they could be sure they knew the reason. Weasel, echoing Millis's words, remarked that rather than that for some obscure reason they both had absurd powers, he would more likely believe that their powers came about because of something more concrete. In response to Millis's clarification about Rain being a hero, the boy told of the country of Altine existing a millennium ago, constantly at war with Vegalta. The only person who could match Vegalta's sage was a hero named Rain. Millis believed that if he was equal to the sage, then his name should have been preserved in history. Rain explained that they had searched but couldn't find anything about Altine, let alone wars with him. He hadn't just been overwritten, it was as if he had been erased from history. so they tried to find clues in other aspects besides history, but they had a shortage of free hands. In response, Weasel pointed out that Blanche's family was old. His family had a long history of supplying the royal family with magical equipment, so he would try to track down something. Millis asked if she, being an ordinary person, could help them. Rain stunned her when he told her that the place where she lived with the sheep, Noaberg, was the land of Altine. The girl became interested in her village's past. In the time when Ryan lived, it was a secluded region that only a handful of nomads knew about. The girl was amazed that her home had been nothing more than a rural area for 1,000 years. Elria thought the place was nice and isolated, which Millis took to heart. Elria explained that it looked like a secluded area where the elves lived, and there was a good chance that the information was still passed down as tradition. Rain wanted them both to help them and tell them if they learned anything. Weasel was pleased with their trust, but he thought it was obvious that they could only talk about it with trusted people. Millis found it hard to believe that a man who had lived a millennium ago had been reborn. Weasel also noted that if someone was trying to change history in this way, there was a chance that they would be targeted because they were aware of it. That is why Rain was hesitant to tell the boys about it, but it meant that they just had to protect them, which was not a problem. These words reassured them, for nowhere was safer than next to them. Rain reported that besides the two of them, Alma was also aware of this. Her ancestor was one of his comrades who had used that banner. The guys then realized that that magic equipment was preserved from the last millennium. Now that they knew everything, Rain, regretting having involved them in this, hoped to count on their help. Weasel and Millis reacted calmly, expressing their willingness to help their friends at any moment. All the while, Alma was looking for Rain and Elria as they had been summoned by the headmaster. Their smirk seemed suspicious to her. She and Elise attended a meeting to discuss how they would handle that incident. They walked to the door leading to the principal's office. Eliza knelt, expressing remorse for her actions. Alma reminded her that she held the position of principal. She realized that even though they had overextended themselves, they had helped evacuate the students and faculty. But the royal family and the Magicians Association refused to honor them. Rain thought it was the right decision to defeat a special level monster with a single blow when even special rank mages had gone through difficulties in fighting it. They couldn't accurately reveal information to the public, and even if he and Elria helped in the evacuation, they shouldn't forget that they had destroyed the environment. That's why he had no objection to the decision. Alyssa thanked him for his explanation and conclusion. According to her, the royal family and the Magicians Association could no longer ignore his power. But while its source remained unknown, they could not officially confirm how strong it was. Alma Kanos, as a mage of special rank, would investigate the details of his strength and judge. Also regarding Rain's test, all the special ranks decided to postpone it. Eliza confronted them to the end because it is the same as not recognizing him. Rain understood the principal perfectly well, but she hadn't finished her speech yet. Elria also had something to say. The principal believed that if Rain failed because of this, the Caldwin family might suffer. But the girl also wanted to fight a special level mage. Being impressed, Eliza muttered that even with the restraints, Elria was more than strong. She thought that they could achieve that if they told them that she would become a special level mage in the future. Alma escorted the guys out of the study in a hurry. She was extremely satisfied with their work. Now they had a good excuse to meet and exchange information. Alma repeated that her ancestors had served him and she was, after all, their descendant. Instead of talking in the hallway, she had a place where they could talk in person. It amazed Rain that she could be so relaxed in her student's room. They chatted while playing board games. Alma wanted to ask His Excellency about his current abilities. The boy replied that he was just eating and practicing. Alma realized it was a mistake to ask him and asked Elria's opinion. To begin with, the girl emphasized that his magical powers were unusual. For some strange reason, Rain had obtained a unique magic power. She thought that his entire body had been strengthened by magic, which was why he had become stronger. In other words, his stamina is just a side effect. At that moment, she saw Rain's magic power flowing from his body, flowing into his sword and striking with it. It couldn't even be called magic or spell. One could also look at it another way. He is able to change the terrain just by imprinting his very dense and complex magical power into it. That's why he was able to suppress their magic, it just had a lower density. Alma dared to speculate that his superior's magic power then surpassed the sage. Elria didn't rule out the chance that Rain's magic was mixed with something unknown. From behind them, it sounded surprising to him. The boy knew that until he understood his own magical powers, he wouldn't be able to use magic. Also, Elria speculated the possibility that Rain's magic was unnatural. She remembered that he had been sick when he was young in his past life. They guessed that perhaps it was a reaction to another magical power. It happens when another magical power flows through your body. Reacting, the body rejected it. Alma reasoned that the cause lay in the magic that flowed in his blood. It is similar to when you receive a blood transfusion and your body refuses to accept it. But gradually it gets used to the magic and stabilizes. Rain found something strange about it, and so did Elria. At that time, magic was not common knowledge. Alma had heard about it from a report of a child who had been severely traumatized. That child had been transfused with more blood than recommended. But they only knew this because of the advances in modern healthcare. 1,000 years ago, for poor children, they did blood transfusions several times, in large amounts. Rain knew his body was weak, but he had never been injured. Elria noticed that was why someone had tried to make it so that only their magical power flowed in Rain. But such a thing is still impossible at this age. Moreover, they channeled an unknown magic power into him, knowing for sure that it would work. It was as if someone from the distant future had given Ryan the power. The boy claimed it made him who he was and had no complaints. He was sure of his words, for if it weren't for this power, he would have died on the side of the road 1,000 years ago. Thanks to it, he was able to meet Elria and live a happy life, so he was very grateful. To buy time, Alma could report on this little by little. After that, she would be able to study His Excellency. She remembered what she had been instructed to convey to him. The envelope given to Rain looked like an invitation from the royal family. The boys had to dress up to go to the celebration. Rain was displeased that Alma had so easily forgotten to deliver the invitation, and remembered Lyeth, who wouldn't have let that happen. A few hours earlier, Caldwin residence, Alicia became aware that the boys had been invited to the castle tonight. The woman inquired how much time they had in reserve. When she learned that it was about 2 hours, she caused quite a commotion. On the way to the palace, Elria was feeling anxious, as she was not much of a party person. Rain recalled that the decree came directly from the princess. The girl worried that it would be hard to move around in her dress, and if she moved too much, her hair would get ruined. He pointed out that she had put so much effort into creating a cute look and it would be a shame to ruin it. With these words he managed to reassure her. Rain never thought he would come here. They were met at the entrance by the royal subordinate. He served Her Highness as caretaker and was the head butler, Selvas. Rain informed them that they had come at Her Majesty's invitation. The butler was pleased to see that Elria had not changed at all. The boy apologized for her shyness. The butler was sympathetic. Since childhood, she had always hidden behind Alicia's back. Rain could see that the girl was preoccupied with something. She looked for a special person. Selvas assured his guest that he held Her Highness with his magic. If it was his magic, she was calm. Rain did not understand what was the need to restrain the princess. However, the answer to the question did not take him long. The princess was looking forward to seeing Elria, and upon hearing of her arrival, she hurried to meet her. The first princess of the magical kingdom of Vegalta was named Christa von Vegalta. The girl missed Elria madly, for they had not seen each other for 3 whole years. Elria asked that whenever they met she not cling to her. Selvas apologized for letting Rain see this. Her Highness Princess Christa had known Elria since she was a child, and treated her like her own little sister. She loved her so much that the king ordered her that she would not return home until she finished her training. Finally, Christa's attention turned to Rain, the fiancé of her close friend. Putting aside formalities, she granted him permission to call her Chris. She would also address him informally. But the girl's approval was only half-hearted. The lad asked for an explanation of what she meant. The princess was afraid that if she didn't recognize their engagement, Elria would definitely hate her. So the other half meant that she doubted his abilities. She found it hard to believe that someone who couldn't use magic was capable of competing with someone like her. Rain guessed that she had invited them to see for herself his power. It seemed to her as if he was used to this sort of thing. But the guy wasn't used to it, he was just ready for it. Since Elria has such exceptional talent and a reputation as a genius magician that this country is proud of, maybe she could explain his strength. That's why instead of hiding it, he wanted to help them, which would in turn help develop the study of magic. He turned out to be calmer than Chris had expected. Elria hoped this would show her how amazing Rain was, but her friend didn't recognize more than just his power. The guy guessed that it was about his bloodline. According to her, he could just do something and get recognized. She was talking about something more important than that. What she wanted was to test his love for Elria. With that said, the butler invited Rain inside. The princess arranged a contest to show who loved Elria more. Rain was confused by the people whose presence signaled that they were not the only ones invited. Chris explained that it was getting close to the time for the regular party for the courtiers, so she invited the 2 of them for a side show. Those who have been serving in the palace for a long time knew Elria, so they were curious who her fiancé would turn out to be. She also said that she had already done her research. It concerned Rain's daily routine at the Magic Academy. Even though he was stigmatized as not being able to use magic, he was still contributing to his village. Even after considering all of this, Chris still didn't recognize that he was worthy of Elria, considering herself not young and foolish enough to turn a blind eye to the facts. But personally, she felt that he was taking Elria away from her. But even if there were no audience here, she would still check whether his love for Elria was true or not. Shifting his attention to himself, the butler described each of the opponents. Her Highness Princess Christa, who loved Elria so much that she behaved eccentrically, and Rain Frieden, who was fortunately her fiancé. The contest between these two would be conducted by him. The princess expressed her indignation, sensing ill intent in her representation. Selvas continued by saying that everyone working here was aware of this. Since everyone already knew it, they had high hopes for Rain. The winner would be the one who knew Elria better. The girl felt awkward because all eyes were fixed on her. She only dreamed of being home as soon as possible. The princess was fascinated by her friend, but she was forbidden to touch her. Selvas, apologizing for the awkwardness, gave the word to Rain. The boy revealed that not much time had passed since he had met Elria, but as her fiancé, he would do his best to live up to the expectations of her and everyone here. Chris, for her part, stated that she had known her since she was a child. She knew what she liked and didn't like, even how many times she spilled her afternoon tea, and what varieties it was. The butler voiced the terms of the competition. They could answer after pressing a button. The one asking the questions and judging would be Elria herself. There was no way she expected to take on such an important role. She had no choice, for many people were asking to hear her voice. It was time for the first question to be asked. Each action of her friend made the princess more and more amused. The butler tried his best to calm her down. Rain suggested that Selvas read the questions instead of Elria. No sooner had the butler finished the question about her hobby than someone pressed a button. Chris knew it was reading. Not just books, she liked to read papers on magical research. Elria awkwardly confirmed her answer. The princess felt superior to the boy. Rain realized that he was facing a serious opponent, but he wasn't about to back down. Chris began to tease him, insinuating that he wouldn't be able to answer any questions until the very end. The guy asked not to worry about it. He was just very surprised by her reflex. Against all odds, Elria believed that Rain could answer all the questions, and he felt that support. Reacting just as lightning fast, the princess replied that Elria had slept with her favorite stuffed toy, Valley's big black dog. Rain guessed that Princess Chris was using magic. The speed she had shown in their first meeting, he had seen similar magic in the past. If they are of the same type, there is a chance that she predicted the question and answered it. In other words, her speed is simply unbeatable. Elria asked permission to come up with the following questions. The girl asked what her favorite seasoning for food was when she was very tired. It seemed to the princess that this question was too specific. But Elria only asked the first thing that came to her mind. The answer to this question was known to Rain. She liked salty things. Elria was thrilled to have gotten the right answer to her question. The fourth question was about what guided her in the school cafeteria when she chose what to eat. The boyfriend answered that she chose a different food from his because she wanted to split their meals in half. She further asked what she did after taking a huge bath with Millis. He recalled that she stopped by the dining room and bought desserts for two, and then ate them with him in their room. The sixth question was what she did before going to bed. Rain answered that she rolled around on the bed, trying to make sure she had enough room to avoid hitting him. Chris did not understand the reason for his embarrassment. She believed that they were showing their closeness with these questions and was sure that they were also feeding each other in private. Turning to the reports, the butler noted that they did so even in front of a crowd in the dining room. Selvas asked Elria to ask one last question. They should have named what she liked. Rain assumed it was warm tea and milk. It was time for Elria to voice her answer. The boy turned out to be wrong, but she wasn't about to reveal her answer. The girl decided to keep it a secret. Rain informed Selvas of their desire with Elria to get some rest. The people at the castle said they were worried about them. The girl said that even as a child, whenever she came to the royal palace, Chris was always by her side. She never thought that everyone would be so worried about her. Even though Chris was too active, she felt better when she was with her. The princess praised them for their work. Rain thanked her for such a good opportunity and for introducing them to the palace staff. Admitting that she had deceived him at first, the princess called Rain a good fellow. She had not expected such warm treatment for both of them, but she had to call on them because she needed their help. She supposed the hero Altine was having fun. Rain was surprised that so much time had passed and she was still making such a scary face. It wasn't hard to guess that she was little Tiana. He knew that Princess Chris looked like someone. and it turned out to be Little Miss. She had noticed that he had been quite handsome when he was younger and never would have thought that that old grump could have looked like that. Guy was also surprised that the little girl who had started crying after losing to the old man showed up like this. He was still getting on her nerves. Rain guessed that she hadn't reincarnated here. From their point of view, she had used magic to send her consciousness from the past here. Tiana borrowed Chris's body to talk. Elria asked if she was really Tiana. The girl gave an affirmative answer. Then Elria began to relate all those events that had happened to her. Tiana panikedly explained that most of the time it was Chris who was overly attentive to her, although she did occasionally switch places with her. Elria recalled the time she had stayed overnight and Chris had made her try on all those clothes. Tiana replied that it had been Chris, too. She had just clued her in on what outfits looked good on Elria and also saw the picture she had taken. Elria announced an upcoming lecture. She didn't want Tiana to get excited about being told off, but the one called it impossible. She was insanely happy to be able to talk to Elria again. Tiana admitted that she wanted to address her as soon as possible. Just like when she was alive 10 years ago, she wanted Elria to call her name with a smile. Elria, too, was glad to meet her. It had been 10 years since her death, which meant that Tiana was now all grown up. The girl had actually grown taller than Elria. Tiana regretted that she couldn't show her how beautiful she had become. The girl hardly had any time left, and she couldn't control her emotions. Since the little miss had already revealed herself, Rain figured she had something to tell them. This also applied to how she was related to Chris. Tiana started with the reason for Elria's death. Elria died because she lost all of her magical power. It happened 1,000 years ago. Having fulfilled the norm, Rain was going to return home with Lyeth as before. The boy thought it wouldn't look good if he was the only one accompanying him. The old man thought that the fewer chaperones, the easier it would be for them. The hero was not given peace of mind by Tiana, who descended on him with an aggressive attack. But her attempt was not successful. Rain noticed that the girl still lacked speed. Her magic, as always, was annoying him. Elria warned her not to do anything she wasn't asked to do. The girl again failed to control her magic power, which ran out. Elria gave her a potion to restore her magical power. Rain laughed at the inexperienced Tiana afterward. She still had 100 years to train before she could compete with him. Lyeth talked about time jump magic. He thought it would be hard for someone other than the hero to counter it. After thinking about it for a while, Rain reasoned that if he could anticipate the girl's actions, and if he could understand her thoughts, he would be able to deal with it. He believed that Lyeth was also capable of it. Usually, the guy could analyze her, but he couldn't stop her. Tiana asked Elria's opinion on what to do to stay longer in the world of time. After thinking about this question, the girl reasoned that entering the world of time, she transformed her body with magical power. Tiana noticed that the consumption of magic power for this was very high. At this time, it was as if she could see footage from the not-too-distant future moving in front of her. Since her entire body was being transported into the future, she could only jump for about 10. Recently, Tiana had learned how to transport only her consciousness into the future, and so she began to see an even slightly more distant future. But still, she couldn't defeat this old soldier, for which she felt resentful. Seeing the time of the future seemed to Elria to be beyond the ordinary. It was the level of the soul or the gods. Tiana claimed that theoretically it existed, so the possibility was. Elria observed that Tiana was human and it was hard for her, but for an elf like her, it was just. Tiana marveled at her. Elria appreciated her ability to genuinely praise humans. When she discovered that the mug of tea was empty, she rushed to make a new one. Despite the maid's concern, Tiana wanted to bring her tea herself. When she entered Elria's room, she found her lying on the floor. After Elria's death, she wished to see her alive again just once, and sought a way to travel back in time using time jump magic. She believed that by using Elria's magic item, she would accomplish what she had planned. And then, one day, Tiana noticed that there was a hole in the time tunnel. And by going through it, she entered a world 1,000 years from now in the mind of Chris. In that future, there was a girl who looked a lot like Elria. For the sake of making this future real, she inherited the role of a sage. They joined forces with the remnants of the Altine army that had disintegrated after they lost their hero, and destroyed the Altine Empire. Now Tiana was trying her best to spread the magical techniques that Elria had invented throughout the mainland. In order for her to move to the 1,000-year future, she needed Chris as a receptacle and a magic item that had Elria's magic power left in it. And she couldn't make holes in time. At any rate, the hole that was made in time allowed one to travel back and forth. And thus, it could be said that someone too had either been reborn or time jumped in the millennia past. Therefore, she needed to make sure that the hero was able to be reborn in this world just like Elria. Before talking about herself, she also didn't tell Chris anything in detail. Elria thanked Tiana for trying so hard for her. but the girl had to go back. Elria told her that the united country they had built was even more beautiful than it had been 1,000 years ago. She asked her to tell the people of the former Altine as well that they were now living happily in the future. On the evening of the same day, the girls had a sleepover. Elria was surprised at the princess's acquaintance with Tiana. Chris called her another version of herself. She had no idea that Tiana was one of her great ancestors, and she approved of her love for her. Elria saw a great resemblance between them. Only Chris spoke a little differently, so Chris was trying to make a certain impression. Since she was known as a strange princess, no one was surprised that she was talking to Tiana. Recently, among ordinary people, she was also known as a strange princess. Chris didn't bother to question her friend. She had enough of what she had heard from Tiana. After all, if she knew too much, she would have to change her attitude toward her. But no matter what happened, she would continue to be her friend so that she could be there for her and support her in really difficult moments. As for Frieden, it seemed to her that he was a person she could trust. Elria, radiant with joy, thanked her friend. Chris said it was not necessary to thank her, but for her support, she would like Elria to let her use this magic item to take it off. The girl refused, noting that she would not be visible in the picture. The Galta Royal Magical Academy. Millies and Weasel were chatting at a cafeteria table, missing their friends. The boy inquired about her plans for the weekend. She was happy to report that she would finally be going to the kingdom's capital to have fun. Since she was going there alone, Weasel wished to keep her company. He wanted to look for materials for a new magic subject. He was of little use in the last exam. Millies remarked with great feeling that he had helped a lot. Besides, he was good at understanding people's feelings and being there for them. She thought him very kind. Her words caused him great embarrassment. Arriving at the capital of the kingdom, Millies was surprised to see so many people and not a single sheep. Weasel said that in the capital, the main method of travel was magical teleportation items, but the streetcars were used to move around the shopping district. Millies didn't mind riding the streetcar, but she wanted to ride a magical car more than anything else. Weasel noticed that despite being able to travel long distances, their magic consumption was enormous. That was probably why only aristocrats owned them. Millies saw that his range of knowledge was not limited to magical equipment. He considered it natural for an artisan. She stopped at the black tea store she wanted to visit. Ferg, also finding himself in town, noticed the boys and followed them. Millies expected this from a store that supplied directly to the royal family. She admired its arrangement. Weasel decided that making tea was a hobby of hers, and from then on it proved to be so. She prepared a gift for Elria that contained special anti-sleep tea leaves. Weasel drank it occasionally, and was aware of its rather powerful effect. Millies concluded that it was indeed unrelenting, for Weasel worked by straining his eyes hard. The boy realized that he should be more careful with it, lest he further ruin his eyesight. Millies didn't think he had it that bad. Taking off his glasses, he moved as close to her as possible, being able to see her face clearly from just that distance. It would probably be more convenient if he had developed something to put right over her pupils. Overwhelmed with excitement, Millies hurried to the cash register. When the boys stopped at the park, the girl wondered why he had decided to take martial arts lessons from Rain. Weasel explained his interest, but the real reason was still the incident in the academy cafeteria. After all, Rain had covered Millies with himself before Verminen could use magic and then repelled her. The boy admitted that he was hurt. That time his body refused to move, and that's unacceptable for a mage, so he wanted to get stronger. And besides, he just admired Rain. Millies had time to get excited at the thought of liking him. Having witnessed the conversation, Ferg asked for more details about what they were just discussing. Millies reported that Rain and Elria were not with them today. They had been called to the castle. Ferg remarked that he hadn't asked about them. What interested him most was that Weasel wanted to take lessons from a commoner. Millies didn't see this as anything unusual. Those two often mentored them when it came to magic. Pensive, he wondered if they knew what would be on the situational exam this month. All they knew about was practicing teamwork to prepare for next month's comprehensive exam. But then, meeting Ferg's satisfied look, they remembered that there had to be 5 people on one team. The next morning at the academy was truly amazing. Elria was wide awake, and she was not even shaken. The girl declared that she was usually not as lethargic as they said. It was the tea and milk that Rain had made her. Millies met the news with great surprise. Weasel inquired how things had gone at the castle. Rain talked about how after chatting with Her Highness the Princess, they attended a Thanksgiving reception. He was thanked by many people regarding Elria, including their personal circumstances. There was also progress. If someone had stolen magic power from Elria, it was most likely some technology from the future, meaning that it now appeared that someone from the future might be involved in their rebirth. Weasel and Millies also gave them some unpleasant news. There were supposed to be 5 people in the group for the upcoming exam. They were 1 short. The most important thing was that it had already been decided who would be that person. Ferg hurriedly greeted the guys. His activity toward them seemed suspicious to Rain. However, the latter explained it as the beginning of training for the upcoming comprehensive exam. He solemnly announced that from that day on, as members of the same team, they would work together. The last situational exam didn't count because armored dragons suddenly appeared during it, which were kind of considered extinct in this era. They were considered a threat to the existence of magic, and so exterminated them and even the beasts from which they had mutated. They were listed as extinct in the archives. It was decided that the next situational exam would involve practice battles between teams of 5 people each. And in order to prepare for the exam, the boys came to the training field. Each time, Rain wondered whether Elria had to hug him. She explained that if one cuddled up when teleporting, the teleportation area became smaller and consequently less magic power, and coordinate calculations were required. It was not the first time the boys had to observe this scene. No one in the class was already paying attention. Ferg noticed that not being able to use magic was very inconvenient. Without Caldwin Rain, not that teleportation magic, not even a teleportation magic item wouldn't be able to use it. Ferg wouldn't be able to endure such a thing. Meeting the questioning look in his direction, he supplemented that since he couldn't since he was born, there was nothing that could be done. Rain urged him to behave as usual. A few hours ago, Ferg had announced that they would be working as a team from this day forward. Turning to Millies, Rain heard that his 2 friends were unlikely to be able to return to studying before the situational exam. Millies was aware of Ferg's confidence that some of the kids in the class would call him to join the team, but all the teams turned him down. For this reason, he found himself in complete isolation. Millies warned him of Elria's strictness. She was interested to see how long the son of a noble family would hold out. The lad declared that for him, unlike a commoner, it would be a cakewalk. Having memorized what he said, the girl announced that she would call him a weakling from a good family, worse than the commoners. He in turn declared that he would call her a redneck, worse than farmers, if he endured. She was pleased to note that her family was engaged in animal husbandry. The others looked at them with gravity, realizing that they had a long and close job to do with them. Alma couldn't stop thinking about the training battle with His Excellency. An academy official explained that the principal had urged them to be prepared for emergencies. Philia Therja was a mage of the 1st rank. She had been appointed as Alma's assistant. She was the one who conducted the exam for her and Elria. Philia mentioned the guys from other classes who could support in case of danger. The inconsolable Alma suggested that she take part in a practice battle with them. Frightened, she reminded her that she had come as a teacher to supervise. Besides, she didn't have magic suitable for combat like Alma. Alma asked not to address her informally. If Philia embarrassed herself, she, as the one who recommended her for the position of teacher, would have to practice until morning. Before they began practicing, Millies suggested that they accurately divide the duties between them. Elria would now also be judged on whether she could coach them above a certain level, and it was unknown whether they could continue to be on the same team with the 2 of them. From the results of the last exam, it was clear that Elria could almost unequivocally become a mage. Therefore, in order to make sure that she was worthy of being a mage of a special rank, it was decided that she would instruct the other students, and Alma would teach Philia. Rain decided that they should then form a team with the boy Ferg at the head. If they counted Valk and Lucas, who didn't go to the academy at that time, and their 3, they would get exactly 5 people. Ferg, proud of becoming the leader, suddenly thought. How easily he had been appointed leader seemed a surprise to him. The boy was pleased to realize that they had to follow his every word. But Rain slowed him down by saying that they would not follow his words. Rain explained to him that the role of a leader was to make decisions. When the armored dragon attacked, Ferg made the decision to flee. In a tense situation, he made the right decision and saved the wounded because of it. In terms of decisiveness, he was better than others. He could use level 8 magic, so if he was given the task of commanding and making decisions during the battle, the group's combat effectiveness would be greatly affected, so it was better to deal with it with Weasel, who was good at analyzing everything. That is, Verminen will make decisions at the beginning of the battle and when retreating. Elria pondered the plan with Millies in front, but of course, Her opinion had to be taken into account. Millis wanted to know more about it. The idea was that until the others figured out what to do, she would have to fend off concentrated attacks as best she could. Millis congratulated Ferg on being the leader. Elria reasoned that it would be a little hard for him to be in the lead. The more powerful magic a person can exert, the less often he stands in front. Rain and Elria agreed that when you have a lot of magic power like Ferg, you can forcefully suppress the enemy's magic from afar, so physically, such people are the weakest. In close combat, they are helpless. It was frightening to think what their confident gazes were up to. Rain took responsibility for the boy. He asked Weasel to give some magical object that he wouldn't be sorry to break. Weasel asked if he knew how much money went into the production of magic items. Rain assured him that no one would break it on purpose. It was just that if one put magic power into it with all his might, it could break, and it was fine if it was something in the shape of a sword. Weasel had a prototype that didn't live up to expectations. Now they were ready to start practicing. Ferg didn't understand what he was going to teach him if he didn't know how to use magic himself. Rain had swept up that he could bat as if he were using magic. If Ferg could win, he might as well fulfill his request to the best of his ability. The offer sounded tempting, so he readily agreed. In the training area, they could not hold back and use magic to the fullest. Rain decided to make concessions to him, intending to wait 1 minute before attacking. At least he didn't think about his loss. Seeing this as a big chance, Ferg declared that if he won, he would not allow him to be called a boy. He was confident that his opponent would not be able to repel his magic as easily as last time. Rain rushed towards the clots of magical energy, forming spheres like a man possessed. Clutching his sword in his hand, he moved into the midst of the magical chaos. He displayed incredible agility as he dodged the fireballs. Rain regarded his abilities as not bad, but advised him to cover his weaknesses. Still, he realized that he could not do without the use of other magic. He saw that Ferg was preparing a new attack for him. The guy made a direct hit that was so easy to avoid. That's what his quick attack was. But he himself knew that the spear of flame was only a decoy. And in fact, he was still controlling the fire that was centered in the blind spots of the Rhine behind. Rain advised him to work on mastering magic. Because of the sound of burning that traveled along with the flames, his attack was ineffective. Ferg remembered his mission to be stronger than everyone else. His heart was pounding frantically and fire burned in his eyes. There was tension in the air, and he knew that this was his chance to prove to everyone that he was worthy of respect. He created a devastating army of flames. Rain didn't move, as if he was waiting for something. Minutes after the battle began, he went into active action. If only Ferg possessed swordsmanship, he wouldn't have to face such a He was only wasting his talent. As a result of the training, Rain summarized that he was not bad at thinking and reacting. Rain should have trained him a bit, and then he would be able to prove himself in battle on his own. He saw that Ferg was capable of learning his sword arts. As they watched the column of fire rushing toward the sky, the boys imagined the magnitude of the battle. Weasel marveled at the fact that he was facing Lord Verminen alone. Elria speculated about his desire to help the Lord, since he seemed like a heavy child. In addition, in Rain's past life, no one had taught him techniques. Millis concluded that he was stupidly strong. Elria thought that he had been taught something other than combat skills, like martial arts and strategy, but there was no one who could master his style of combat. As it seemed to her, that was why Ferg was a prospect for Rain. Millis added that Ferg was also feisty, so Rain wanted to fix his character, which was very much like him. Weasel continued to worry about his magical tools. Elria suggested that they have a practice fight too. The boys were amazed by her strange attraction to battles. She warned them that if they were hurt, they would never forget it and would also quickly memorize everything. She thought this was the most effective and best way to learn. Said from the mouth of a sage was more like the words of a sergeant. Weasel could only remember the spreading taste of blood in her mouth. The girl in search of people from her class called out to the guys above, asking which tower they were from. After hearing that they were from the eastern one, she realized that the western one was on the opposite side. And she had believed it when Rafiki had said that she was sure to be here. Rufus Lilas introduced herself to the boys. She was from the country of Celios, who excelled in summoning magic. Hence, it appeared that she was an apprentice of the Western. She was nicknamed the Dragon Princess, but she looked only 12 or 13 years old. Rufus became interested in the girl behind Millis's back. Thinking back to the entrance exam, Rufus realized that Elria Caldwin herself stood before her. She had heard that there was a man so powerful that he was called the reincarnation of a sage, and she was looking forward to meeting him at the academy. Elria had also heard about the child who managed to make contracts with the dragon protectors of Celios and thought it was incredible. To make them contract with all 4 of them, it was the first time such a thing had ever happened. She had been told that they could be seen live in Celios. Rufus replied excitedly that they were all here. Ethinkale was always sleeping on the clouds. Maleficam was drifting in the sea with only his head sticking out of the water. Framahite was amusing himself by riding on lava. Magniphimos was basking in the sun in the forest or on the plain. The story about the dragons was very interesting and captivated the boys. Rufus paid special attention to the dragon that was with her. It belonged to the flying steel dragons, which was known to Elria, although she did not know its scientific name. His name was Volensfirm, type large, class flying, and he belonged to the steel dragon family. As for her and Rafiki, they had been inseparable friends since childhood. Rufus, turning to Elria, recalled her ability to use 10th circle magic and summoning magic. Millies and Weasel insisted on continuing their conversation, hoping that Elria would forget about trying battle with them. Rufus guessed that they were going to have a practice fight. She saw it as a good opportunity to fight Elria. She wanted to take a look at her magic as well, confident that she and Rafiki wouldn't lose to anyone. Rufus suggested that Elria spar. Looking at the boys, Elria wanted to warm up a little too. She summoned a creature called Sheffrey. Rufus was surprised that she had thought of taming a magic eater wolf. Even the mages of Celios couldn't tame it, which was why it was so famous. Elria paid attention to his intelligence. Therefore, he realized that there was no way he could defeat her. Rufus looked forward to the upcoming battle, confident that it would be fun. Leaping onto the dragon Rafiku, she soared into the air. With astonishing speed, she took an advantageous position. Elria, on the other hand, pointed Sheffrey at her. Rufus was confident that the opponent would not be able to climb that high, but the one exceeded her expectations. That wolf was very sensitive to magic power and could sense Elria's magic, and as soon as there was a place to push off, it would jump. Then she commanded her dragon to release fire breath all around. Elria did not rush Sheffrey into action. The air pressure provided a fulcrum, resulting in an explosion. The moment had come for the wolf to reveal itself. Jumping to a great height, he clawed at the dragon, and in an instant Rufus lost control. Rafika collapsed to the ground with a thunderous crash, becoming defeated in this battle. Weasel had no doubt about Elria's ruthlessness. Elria summoned Sheffrey, who gladly rode to her, and just as gladly she chained his mouth. She praised the wolf for his patience. The monster looked like he was ready to lash out at her at any moment. Elria noticed that it was feeding on magical power. She advised Rufus to cancel Rafiki's summoning. Sheffrey had eaten a lot of magic power, so Rafiki's soul wouldn't survive. But Rufus wasn't going to end the fight there. She couldn't let Rafiki lose. Sensing the danger, the wolf became furious, jumping up from his seat. The dragon let loose a jet of fire, and the wolf, offering no resistance, covered the girl, shielding her from danger. Elria hastily cancelled Sheffrey's summoning, saying that it was too much. It was understandable that his magic body was made of magic power, and so he wouldn't die. But such strong attacks were damaging his soul. In a trial battle, it's unacceptable to deliberately try to kill an opponent. For Rufus, a trial fight was the same as a real fight. Philia immediately intervened in the situation. Rain, seeing what was happening, called out to her. It became clear to Philia that they were having a trial fight. But the magic beast Rufus might be in danger if the fight continued. So she suggested to end it there. Turning to the dragon princess, Rain advised her to retreat this time if she wanted to find out who was stronger. It wasn't worth sacrificing her prized dragon for a single victory. Rufus looked back at the exhausted Rafika and felt guilty. Sending her faithful comrade to rest, she expressed her gratitude. The girl stated that the price of victory was not important because victory was the most important thing for them. Having said that, she left the training field. A little time had passed after the fight, but Elria was still thinking about Rufus. Looking at the dragon princess, Rain felt nostalgic for once. In Altine, it was normal for children to become soldiers, and the children realized that it was a good excuse to get rid of them. So they struggled to do something to survive. Rufus had the same look in her eyes as those children. Anyway, it was just his guess. But it seems that she came to the academy with a heavy burden on her shoulders and a determination to do something. On Elria's lap sat her magical beast that she had summoned. The girl was giving it magical power as a reward for its efforts. The bodies of such beasts were made of magical power, so if they were made small, the consumption became less. But to Rain, unlike Elria, he didn't seem as cute.